better now.
It was here last week. Yeah.
Not terribly contagious.
See, that's what's nice
I've
about
heard that
it.
before.
Since it
Didn't believe it?
Oh, even if you're not on. Cool.
It's about that.
Time now for the city council work session followed by city council meeting live here in Grandview City Hall. It's the podium, the mayor, Bob Metzen.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special City Council work session for January 6th, 2020. Lindsay, could you call the roll?
Dora,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Manetza.
Here. We have two items on our work session agenda this evening. First is the presentation on the Loudoun District Library, the annual report presentation. And looks like John Martin.
You've got me.
Okay.
And I brought with me our board president, Dave DeYoung, and our board treasurer, Burton Brooks, both of whom are Grand Haven City Council appointed representatives on our library board. So the first thing I want to say is I just want to say thank you to especially the city cooperation on virtually every silly idea that I come up with passes. Oh, that's a great idea. We got to do that. And so we want to make sure we thank public safety for participating in Touch a Truck and DPW. That wouldn't happen. We use that as a kickoff to summer reading club. It wouldn't happen without your participation. And the naturalization ceremonies that we hold in the library are made so much better because public safety does the color guard duty, and I thank you. So we're here tonight to talk about our annual report and our strategic plan, and we can go for hours if you want, or not.
Or not.
Not. No. And so I'm going to stop talking at this point and turn it over to Dave.
Wow, that was brief. All right. Good evening, everyone. I guess I'd just like to touch on a few things that have been going on, especially with the board and the staff, kind of maybe from a higher level, and highlight some of those things that I think were really meaningful during this last year. Obviously, we have a great staff. We have a great board with wonderful representation from all the municipalities in the school system. And so we do have a very active and engaged board of trustees, a good committee structure to try and make sure the work's effective and efficient. And, and we've done a number of things in this last year that I think you've seen some of the results of. You've seen some of the work being done on the facility over here. We've got a building now that's aged a little bit. We have a group that focuses specifically on making sure we have a good plan. In fact, they've got a plan that goes out 18, 24 months on the work activity that we'll be doing to keep and upgrade and maintain that facility. We also recently sold the Robbins Road property, and that took a group of people who worked very hard on marketing that, so we couldn't have the whole board of trustees involved, so there was a subgroup that worked very hard and diligently. They've now been disbanded and probably want to throw a party, but that was one of those areas that we spin off work, and just like you create work groups, we do the same thing. But I guess I just got to say, from my perspective, the board just really works well together, and I'm sure you all know some of the individual people that are on that board. Good conflict, we work through, resolve it, a lot of good different perspectives. So I think I would summarize that if I want to talk about health of the board. It's a healthy board, and very engaged, and I think has the right perspective on what we're doing. And a big part of what helped us with that perspective, we went through and did about 18 months of work doing community conversations where we pulled together groups of parents, municipal leaders, business people, members of the school system, to really work through expectations for the library, aspirations for the library, and that became the foundation for work that we did with an outside consultant to really walk us through a very meaningful long-term strategic planning process, and I think it really helped to align the whole board to make sure that we're also aligned with our communities. And so that's just from my perspective, I think I should be reporting to you guys on the health of the group that we have that's caring for the what you've entrusted us with. Something that could be missed. We had a group that went through and went over the last year and a half all our policies. business practices. We brought in a new business manager. So there have been a lot of great things done just from the, call it fiduciary, management of the resources and making sure that we have policies that are relevant, meaningful, compliant with the laws. There's a lot of laws relating to, things that we have to comply with. And so that was a lot of work that was done that I would highlight, that it's behind the scenes and ultimately bears fruit with all the wonderful things that go on at this library and ensuring that this legacy that we have in this community is maintained. I think a couple other areas that I think that you'll see evolving here with the organization. Even out of the 5-year plan, we're looking very carefully at the facility, and we're bringing in an outside group to look at how we're utilizing the facility as things have changed. We used to have a lot more computers. Now people are bringing their own computers. So there's some changes in what we're doing. We've taken the computer lab that was downstairs, we've moved it upstairs. It means we don't have to have separate staff managing it down there, and we saw over time that utilization was going down. We're opening up that space to make more group meeting area, study. We have a lot of people are in there, they're tutors that are working with, kids. They meet at the library, and they can't really do that comfortably upstairs. We have some meeting rooms that they can use, but we kind of create this space where people can dialogue and interact. And the upstairs is the quiet part. The part downstairs is the area where people can meet and interact and engage with each other. So we're really trying to evolve what that library is, and it really is a meeting place for people to come together, from small business people and maybe working on their business plan to, like I said, people are being tutored, or it's play and learn. If you want to have some fun, go over there during the play and learn mornings with all the little kids running around learning how to sing songs together, that type of thing. So again, it's all about the library evolving with the community needs, and I really see that with the way the board and the staff is focused and making these things happen. So again, I think, Burton, you had a few comments?
Okay, yes. One of the big things we did last year was eliminate fines on overdue materials at the library. And I have an interesting story to tell you about. In 1979, I was on the library board, which was advisory to the city council. And we did a study during that year and about library fines. And we found during the year that we spent $5,000 for salaries to collect library fines of our people, and the city, we gained $4,000 in revenues. Now, the board recommended the city council that we eliminate library fines back in 1979. Well, the city council gave great thought to it and said no, that we would not eliminate the library fines, primarily because it brought in $4,000, which was put in the general fund. And so, in essence, the library lost about $9,000, $5,000 for the labor and $4,000 in fines that went to the general fund. This is something catching on around, and what the advantage of eliminating library fines is that many young people, particularly kids who have overdue books and are stopped because they can't pay the fine, and oftentimes these people don't have control over getting to the library. If you live, a distance from the library and you don't have a way to get there, so your books are overdue. What we have found already is that our circulation has increased. It takes a lot less library time trying to collect these fines, and we still will assess a cost. If you lose the material, then we expect you to pay for it. But if you're overdue, it's not a problem anymore. Additionally, our patrons have indicated a real delight in the fact that we've cut the cost on many materials. It is a public library supported by tax fee funds, so we feel that as many services as we can give to our customers, our patrons, at no cost to them is great. If you're among the people that may have gotten some kind of a new electronic gadget for Christmas or recently and can't figure out all the details, we do provide a service, a one-to-one service at the library for people who want to get that service. 616-850-6914, and indicate that you would like some help on learning how to use whatever this new electronic gadget is. And I can tell you from just buying a new version of Word from an old one, I guess I may need some of that service. Wow, what they've done to that program in 10 years. It's unbelievable. So I am happy to have served on this library board since its beginning and very proud of the progress we have made. I think we have a top-notch library, top-notch staff, and we're very fortunate the support we do get from the city and the area. I'll now turn it over to our director, who is the expert on all.
Thank you, Bert. And I just want to highlight one other brand new, straight out of the box program that we're starting this year, and that's we're a blood donation site for the American Red Cross. If you get there by 7 o'clock, or actually probably 6:30, well, we're too late. You'll have to come back in March, which will be the next one. If you have questions, we would be happy to entertain them.
Questions, comments?
No, appreciate the job you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Really great over there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Doing good.
Doing a great job.
Yes, Pat. Do we still have voter registration after the immigration ceremonies?
Yes.
Excellent.
So when we do the
Asking for a friend.
when we do the naturalization ceremonies, the Secretary of State and or the county clerk will also come and do voter registration and take passport applications. Good question.
That's a good point. I saw that in your material. Like, you noted you had 43 naturalization ceremonies with more than 1,700 new U.S. citizens being sworn in since 2015. Right there. I mean,
Right.
That's just really
And what's really funny is so these folks come from basically the western half of the Lower Peninsula.
Wow.
And when they come, I generally ask, who here has ever been to Grand Haven, and who here is for the first time? And
Yeah.
it's usually about 40-50% of the population has never been here.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Great way to bring them in here.
Right.
Too, so, and show off our community. So fantastic. I thought it was really interesting too that you guys have free Ancestry.com services. I know it seems to be a very
Correct.
popular thing these days.
Right.
A lot of people are paying for it, but hey, you can get it free through your local library. So
Right. Yep.
that's excellent.
You have to use that in the
In
building.
library. Okay.
Yep.
Good to know. So perfect.
Thank
Great
you.
work.
And I've always appreciated what the library brings to the community. It's a great civic resource. It's a great cultural resource. I was a little bit struck by the comment that the upstairs is the shh part of the library, because I've never noticed that. This seems to be one of the more
I don't think that exists anymore.
one of the more ebullient libraries that I've been in, and I appreciate that. It's a very different feel to it. It's very comfortable.
It's a
feel.
busy facility, and we're expanding the early kids play, young child play area, so it's going to get even noisier.
All right.
I see. And appreciate all the various services you offer, and the meeting rooms, and the genealogy is valuable. I mean, everything that the library offers fits well in the community, so it's a great service.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you
Thank
do.
you all. And I should have mentioned, since Shar is here, I should have thanked Shar for loaning the library golf clubs and golf balls so that we could set up a 9-hole mini golf course in the library during winter break. So, thank you.
Well, there's something different.
Yeah. Golf at the library.
I missed that.
Well, thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda for this work session is a discussion of the medical marijuana ordinance. They have basically two ordinances that council will be entertaining. One is for the zoning amendment, and the other is for a regulatory amendment under city's general police powers. There has been a public hearing at the Planning Commission already for the zoning piece. There has been no public hearing for the regulatory piece. And that's something that we are working on, and hopefully we'll get some feedback from council members tonight. And later in our agenda, we'll be setting a public hearing for January 20th, so that we'll have a formal public hearing to take comment from the public on these very issues. So normally during our work sessions, we don't take comment from the public. If council chooses to indulge members of the public for comment, we could do that as long as we watch the time a little bit. But in general, work sessions are intended for council discussion of issues. I think to kick things off, so I would like for either Jennifer or Pat to give us a quick rundown on both of the pieces of legislation potentially in front of us.
But I'd just like to start a little bit. Thank you, Your Honor, just to present the reason why there are two ordinances under consideration. One is under your land use authority to prescribe which zoning districts these types of uses might be allowed in. And the Planning Commission spent a great deal of time on that, and I'll ask Jennifer to step up in a second and tell you a little bit about that process. The second ordinance is a regulatory framework that is then imposed to set the rules for how growers, processors, transporters, et cetera, would go about getting a permit in the city if they decide to locate here. So we do need the two separate ordinances. The City Council, or Mayor Manetza, had suggested we have a public hearing. There's not necessarily a requirement to have that public hearing. However, there's nothing to say you can't have a public hearing. And there was some interest in a previous council meeting about maybe having a period where you might be able to hear from or ask questions of planning commissioners who might have been working on this. Two of you were on the Planning Commission that did most of the work on this, or you were there during most of the time they worked on it, I guess I should say. So there's a good deal of familiarity already on City Council, but that public hearing would be an ideal time. You do have a couple planning commissioners here this evening as well that will be able to listen to your discussion, and if you need to ask them questions, they're here. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having ample additional time for public input and discussion. So I am looking for direction on the regulatory framework, and Jennifer maybe is looking for any direction or suggestion on the land use presentation that she's already made. You guys got that. You've had a copy of this for a little while. Hopefully you've had a time to look at it. So I don't know if Jennifer maybe wanted to give us a thumbnail sketch of what she's been working on.
Sure, thank you. Jennifer Howland, Community Development Manager. So the Planning Commission has been working on the proposed zoning ordinance text amendment, the land use regulations, for several months in 2019. I think we started about April or May after the council gave us direction to start working on that. So as a reminder, there are 5 different land uses that we're looking at that the state recognizes. Provisioning centers, growers, processors, safety compliance facilities, and secure transporters. The Planning Commission went through a process of looking at our zoning ordinance, figuring out what land uses are similar to those 5 new land uses and making correlations between that, identifying what zoning districts those uses are allowed in, and then talking about whether the medical marijuana facilities that I mentioned would also be appropriate in those same districts. So we had created different maps to help people visualize what the zoning districts were. The map on your screen is everything but provisioning centers. So in the yellow are the zoning districts that are being suggested after the Planning Commission's recommendation in December. It includes the industrial district, the transitional industrial district, and the beech tree district, where you would allow growers, processors, safety compliance facilities, and secure transporters. The beech tree district, because of its character being different from the other districts, would only allow the secure transporter in addition to a provisioning center, which is another map. So the yellow zoning districts would be eligible. The red represents the drug-free school zone buffer that the Planning Commission recommended. It's a 1,000-foot buffer from schools and the library. And then you can see some orange areas where that overlay has taken out those properties from being eligible from these 4 land uses. The other map that we created is the provisioning center map. This includes all retail districts, so all districts that allow retail establishments today would also allow provisioning centers. The Planning Commission went through a process of determining what districts would be appropriate. Provisioning centers are sort of like a pharmacy, sort of like a medical office where you go into a waiting room and then you're called into the shop where you would look at the materials that you would like to purchase. You make that purchase and then you leave. So the character of what you would see in a typical storefront is a little bit quieter than what you would see in a t-shirt shop or a restaurant. So to that end, the Downtown Development Authority supports allowing provisioning centers in the DDA district, but they were recommending not allowing them on Washington Avenue in the downtown central business district because we only allow retail in the first 3 blocks facing Washington. So they could be on a second story or access off the back, just not in the front, trying to keep the more active storefronts on Washington where people are walking right by as opposed to sort of a waiting room atmosphere. So this map includes all the districts that we allow retail: Waterfront 2, Central Business, Neighborhood Mixed Use, the Commercial District, Transitional Industrial District, Beech Tree District. I think that's all of them. So we started with that large list. We talked about maybe allowing different buffers as well as the drug-free school zone. We looked at where churches were, where daycare facilities were, substance abuse facilities. I mapped those for the Planning Commission. They ultimately elected to move just to the drug-free school zone, just like the other map I showed you. So again, all the schools, the K through 12 schools and the library, a 1,000-foot buffer, and then the purple areas are where you would become ineligible to allow a provisioning center. This recommendation was a 7-0 vote at the December Planning Commission meeting. We did add the language that was reflective of the DDA's recommendation in advance of that hearing. The ordinance that the Planning Commission held in their hands didn't have that language in it, but their discussion included that, and their understanding was that they were recommending approval of an ordinance that would not allow fronting on Washington in the downtown. So that's the ordinance that you have as well. And as Pat mentioned, the regulatory ordinance would be the process for setting how licensing is established, how we might have a lottery system if you decide to limit the number of a particular land use, or you want to have separation between provisioning centers or another operation. A process like a lottery or something like that would be appropriate. The process that the Planning Commission recommended for reviewing these is a special use process. So in that ordinance that you have will be several conditions that each of the 5 land uses would need to follow: special parking standards, the drug-free school zone buffer, and other requirements that we've collected from communities that have done this before, and other similar land uses like manufacturing or processing that we have. We looked at those special use standards, pulled some recommended language into these. So that's the brief overview. I do have several planning commissioners in the audience tonight, so happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have questions for Jennifer at this time?
You guys at the Planning Commission looked at, I know you guys are already on this, pretty much did it, but parks and churches, and that, you decided not to have any zones around that, not even 500 feet or anything like that?
Right, so I started the discussion with maps back in the spring of 19. I created some maps that showed 1,000-foot buffers from the parks, the schools, daycares, substance abuse, churches, and it covered a lot of the community. It showed the Planning Commission that those buffers at 1,000 feet would exclude quite a bit of town. So then they directed me to make a map like this, where it's just the drug-free school zones. We didn't make maps that showed smaller buffers, but that is definitely something that can be done. But the consensus of the Planning Commission was that this was the buffer that they were most in favor of recommending.
Because a lot of churches and that have a lot of kids in them now. They have gymnasiums and stuff like that, and they also have a good example is like the Salvation Army also has the feeding of the youth, and they're always on the streets and stuff on that order. So I just wondered why they didn't consider, churches and that, because it is a gathering place for a lot of youth now.
They did talk about it, and that was earlier on in the process, and that those additional buffers, like Grand Rapids has quite a few buffers. Mm-hmm. the planning commission didn't latch on to those. We did have some comments from the public hearing that we held, where there was concern about how perhaps we should have buffers. There was a church representative that expressed that, another resident that expressed that. So it was discussed, it just wasn't the consensus of the planning commission.
Talking to a few people around town, and the way our community is the way it is that they were pretty well concerned about that, and especially around the churches, and that because of the youth being there. That's what a lot of people were expressing to me, so.
Could, if I could just suggest, we could put a map together showing, if we haven't already.
I have.
Yeah, one of the issues is that when we include churches and some of the other types of uses that have been suggested, for example, making them locate a certain distance from each other, you can't really show that on a map because you don't know where one might locate. So that's just depending on where one might locate. If you make it a distance between them, that just limits the number of them. But we can show you a map, and it eliminates most of the city when you include all of those buffer zones, say for around schools, around daycares, around substance abuse treatment facilities.
There's a lot of places that have those already, so just from what I read, a lot of people have those zones already, so I'd like to see it myself personally.
Okay.
I'm very concerned about it. I have a lot of constituents that are very concerned. They want to make sure we get it right the first time around, and I have a lot of other things to go on. So there's my brother, I don't know if this is even part of this or not, for the zoning part of it, they had what they call neighborhood integrity. He was the mayor over in Carsonville, and for the neighborhood, if they want to something, they would have to have like 75% of the people, or a large number of the people in the area. They would say yes or no to it. If they wanted it in the area, they would say yes. I think it was called neighborhood integrity. It's like getting community involvement in each one of their neighborhoods if they want something, instead of us dictating to our residents of what we do. It'd be nice if we could have something where the neighbors could be involved, if they would like to have that. Is that feasible or not?
So one mechanism for informing neighbors that one might be proposed is the special use process. So all owners and occupants within 300 feet of the property where perhaps a provisioning center is being proposed would be notified of the special use request. So then there'd be a public hearing opportunity for them to speak. The thing about special use permits is that if you meet all of the conditions, then the use will be granted. So the public input is important, and that's a great opportunity for information that staff may not have had, or the applicant didn't have or wasn't disclosing, to share with the community.
The way he was telling me was that by having the neighbors decide if they would like something or not, it was so much easier for this planning commission to look at it saying yes, but to go that route, the people have a voice then. And that's how he used it on their planning commission for different things, especially for like rentals and anything else that comes up in the neighborhoods. So it keeps the integrity of the neighborhood the same as what they'd like to have, the people that are living there.
That suggestion was brought up in so many words at the short-term rental regulation discussion, where different neighborhoods were surveyed.
I remember that.
So we did extensive public engagement in different neighborhoods to gather it as we were creating the amendments to the short-term rental laws. And part of the discussion talked about how, if you're a property owner and you'd like to do a short-term rental, or same thing as a provisioning center or a grow operation, if you can meet all the city's standards, you should be granted that regulation, whether you are friendly with your neighbors or not. Sometimes a neighbor has had a history with you, and they may attempt to stop you from doing something that's legal through the zoning ordinance. So it's a tricky situation, trying to gather public input from the neighbors while still protecting property rights that have been established. So
I just wondered how he handled it over there, because
that's
their
interesting.
lawyer wrote up the whole thing for him, and it was no problem whatsoever. They had some people that were turned down for things and never ended up in court.
Like to your point, one option that's similar to this, not that it would prevent somebody necessarily from being granted a license type later on. But the City of Grand Rapids requires, before somebody applies or as part of their application process for one of these license types, that they do neighborhood outreach. And they require it for all the different medical marijuana license types. And it's, this is wording from their actual application. Says it's to inform nearby stakeholders of the proposed project, receive comments and address concerns about the proposal, when possible, resolve conflicts in advance of the Planning Commission review. So they can kind of start having some of that neighborhood engagement and start resolving some of those concerns. And then they require, as part of their actual land use application, that they submit a good neighbor plan that describes their business plan. So it's things like training staff on crime prevention and awareness, what is there going to be their method to eliminate the sale of marijuana to minors, how are they going to handle littering, loitering controls and trespassing, landscape maintenance, neighborhood communication, and then they actually have to provide written verification that they met with or attempted in good faith to meet with local recognized organizations, adjacent property owners, and planning department staff. And so they have to provide like a copy of the notice they sent to nearby folks, show, what was discussed during that actual meeting, who participated in it, what were the concerns that were brought up and how they're at least working on addressing those. So it doesn't fully say that, hey, the neighbor said, no, you can't apply, but it says that you at least have started to make those engagement attempts and start having some of those conversations with your neighbors.
You need to have that integrity, the neighborhood involvement. So
Absolutely,
that's,
yeah. So I'd like to see something like that, maybe more of what Grand Rapids is doing to at least have that public engagement along those lines. I think that makes sense.
It does.
Something like that was brought up at the public hearing, and we weren't quite sure what that meant, but I think you were speaking of the same concept.
Yeah, and I can share the application with you.
Typically in zoning and land use regulation, you establish an overall plan in your master plan and then specific rules in zoning. And then it stops being a popularity contest at that point. If you meet the standards, you can have your land use, and that's generally been considered private property rights. What Ryan's describing and what sounds like you're interested in would be a little outside of zoning, a little outside of land use regulation, more along the lines of how to process a permit.
Okay.
And that may be a better place for it on our regulatory side rather than on our zoning. I hate to see your zoning become a matter of neighbors have veto power over land use. That's usually a bad way to go when you're doing land use regulations. So I think maybe the place for that is in our application process.
Mike, can I ask you if you had a certain buffer or distance you're interested in having the churches mapped for?
I was thinking like 500 feet or more on that order. If you could give me a map on that, would be a start out for me.
Okay.
Be parks also.
Parks too?
Yep.
Now, Jennifer, the map you made for Planning Commission, you probably still have a copy somewhere, but it had 1,000-foot buffers.
Yes.
Would that be something you have ready access to, or has that been
If I can get into the planning drive?
put away somewhere?
Yep, if I can log into the planning drive, I can pull that up.
Okay, not necessarily at this moment, but
Right, and we have so many parks, so that was one of the things that really struck me when I looked at that map, was a lot of the buffering was because of our extensive park system. It's great for the community, it just covers a lot of the map.
It's the way it is.
Mike, you have more?
I'll just let somebody else take over for a while.
Okay, and we really haven't had any overview or anything of our regulatory ordinance. I don't know, Pat, if you were planning to say anything about it?
Well, there were some specific areas that I called out in a memo to you that, I was kind of looking for some direction on. There is perhaps some desire to not use the proposed ordinance that I put forth at all. There are a great number of ordinance drafts out there from different communities. This was just one I happened to pull from Meridian Township, Michigan. It was readily available. They're a pretty well-developed township with a lot of resources, so I looked at theirs. It looked good. Talked to them about it. They said they did spend quite a bit of money on their attorneys drafting that thing, so I thought, well, we might as well start there. But that ordinance isn't the be-all, end-all. It's just what you're currently looking at. The one area in there, and I've not heard any real interest in it, being that we're much smaller and pretty well built out, the idea of maximum limits on commercial establishments, actually saying we only want 2 or 3 of this type or 4 or 5 of that type. You may not have to do that based on your buffers. They might naturally, the market might sort that out for you as far as limiting the number, because There's only so many that will want to go in here, and if you've got these buffers all over, there'll only be so many pieces of property available that can accommodate their needs. Second one is the consent to search provision that was in the township ordinance that I used. There is some thought that we might want to have elevated rights to get in and search at any time without notice. Some have expressed a concern that, would that be used in a overreaching way, perhaps in a punitive type way to try to kind of harass these establishments if we didn't want them. That would never happen with your Grand Haven department, but I understand the concern. We would recommend that we do have that ability to search when we feel there's a need to. And that's the only time we would potentially, that wasn't me, I don't think, is it?
Your 3 minutes aren't up.
Okay, thank you. I'm pretty close, probably. So I'll move along. I think you all get that one. I was able to check with the state, and the state does have some pretty clearly defined protocols for when they inspect. For example, with a provisioning center under medical marijuana, they would do a pre-opening or initial inspection. They would then, in the first year, inspect it twice, and then each year after that, they do an annual inspection. And it sounds like they've got staff to do that, and they're sticking to that. I was concerned that maybe they wouldn't be available, and we might want to do some local inspections, but, that's up to you. If you want us to be checking on them to ensure that they are abiding by the rules that you set, we are allowed to do that. The statute allows you to set certain conditions and then allows you to do inspections. So the suggestion in the ordinance is that when they apply for a permit, they consent to these searches. Whether or not that holds up, if there is a search at some point, we may end up deciding to get a warrant anyways if we get a complaint. Just to have belt and suspenders, but I just wanted to call that out. The local ownership position is that some ordinances have provided that they would have a local owner preference. Variety of ways you can go about that. It would be up to city council if you even care. The one township that I checked with said specifically that came directly from an elected official who just had the feeling that if there's going to be financial gain, we should make it available to local or more local people first, rather than say some out-of-state big corporate interest that would come in and exploit local resources and take advantage of that. Why not try to give locals a leg up? And then finally, penalties. The proposed ordinance has both misdemeanor and civil infraction in the penalty phase. Recommendation from our attorney is that you go with one or the other. Either go with a civil infraction, which means it's not a criminal offense if you violate, and you write a ticket if somebody violates your ordinance. If it's a misdemeanor, then it is potentially criminal charges, and it could be written as a misdemeanor under your ordinances. So those are just 4 areas that were already pointed out. You may have a lot more, and we're ready to react and respond as you direct.
Okay, thank you. Mike, were you done, or do you have more you want to speak now, or do you want to let it go
If anybody
around?
else wants to go ahead to the regulatory matter, they want.
I'm with you, Mike, on putting a buffer zone around churches and parks and daycare. I think it's important that we do that. I think we need to listen to what our constituents say, and I've heard a lot from that too, and there's a lot of concern out there for this. So I would like to also say that we need to keep a buffer zone around those areas. And any drug rehab place too, I think we need to keep a buffer zone around those. So, so anyways, I think we need to look hard and long at this, and I think, but I think we need to put a buffer zone around all these facilities and keep them away from our kids.
Ryan and Mr. Dora. I'm going to get confused with mics on each end.
I feel like I have a lot on all this, so I don't
So
know.
you were both right there in the planning commission.
I can guess I could take
Debate.
piece by piece here.
So Ryan, if you want to start.
Yeah. I mean, I can start off with the sensitive, land uses piece, related to religious institutions or substance abuse treatment facilities or daycares. I think, in principle, I think the planning commission had a lot of discussion about this. And I tend to agree with them in principle. I don't think they're necessary. I think a lot of individuals drive and walk by pharmacies and other places that sell products that some may view as less than desirable all the time. And I don't think that this would change if you were to put some buffering in place. You know, this is more of a medical office kind of a style, not type of establishment. But you know, I am sensitive to the concerns that some have on this, and wanting to be, you know, cautious and more restrictive in their approach, at least initially. So you know, I'm willing to at least look at some maps for religious institutions and substance abuse treatment facilities. I think parks might go a little far, and daycare centers might go a little far, but for religious institutions and substance abuse treatment facilities, of 100 yards, that's a football field's length, that's 300 feet. Take a look at some maps and see how that would kind of restrict some things and kind of find some common ground, or kind of come to some consensus on this. I'm willing to work with my fellow council members on that. Despite some of the principle of it. On the consent to search piece, you know, I think the language that's in this proposed regulatory ordinance is overly broad. I think, I mean, the language that's in this proposed ordinance subjects these businesses not just to the goodwill and our local law enforcement, but it says it subjects these businesses to federal, state, or local law enforcement searches at any time, which I think is unreasonable, a little bit beyond unreasonable search and seizure protections that folks would have under the Constitution. And you know, I understand that there's some, you know, another community that has this, and they haven't had, you know, concerns, you know, at this point with it, but I'm not quite sure that it's the right thing for us. I don't think we want to go down a path of having overly broad, you know, search powers from law enforcement to be a requirement to do business in the community. Now, I certainly understand that this industry should face some greater regulatory scrutiny. I think that there can be some reasonable search provisions that are in place. Grand Rapids, for example, at least the owner and operator has to sign consent to allow the city, so that kind of gets rid of the state and federal law enforcement's consent to search, to inspect their facility at any time during normal business hours to ensure compliance with the applicable laws and regulations. I think that seems a little more reasonable, at least places a time frame, so a business owner isn't subject to search in the middle of the night when their business isn't open, and at least places a restriction that it be the city doing it, not our state or federal law enforcement. And really those searches, and I think Pat kind of hit on that, I think their goal would be to be looking for non-compliance, and so if we had some kind of language that we could put in, maybe that relates to like the state rule has, that, you know, they're looking for evidence of non-compliance, I think that seems a little bit more reasonable, and cut back a little bit. On the local ownership piece that Pat wanted some feedback on, I would change this up a little bit, and instead of requiring, right now it requires two, you have to have pre-qualification, or 75% the owners are residents, or they have to agree not to transfer the license for 30 months. I would require all three, but then make a change to the residency requirement. You know, my worry with these facilities is that, you know, with the state's capital requirements for them being so high, that it's going to be a lot of big business, out of the area business coming in, and they're not familiar with our community and what our interests are, and the things that we're concerned about, and so I think at least some ownership at least can help with some of that. So that way somebody has at least a vested interest in what happens to the community and the impact that the business may have. And so maybe we look at, you know, 25 to 35% of them having local ownership. But I am sensitive to, I think one of the gentlemen that commented on, or somebody that comments on this talked about, essentially he was saying we don't want puppet ownership. We don't want somebody just to say, we'll give you a stake in the business, you kind of sit over there, and we're going to do what we want anyway. I think and I don't know what the mechanism would be to make sure that there's some more active ownership there. I think that'd be kind of difficult maybe to regulate, but something to at least have some discussion on. On the security portion of the regulatory ordinance, Grand Rapids requires a crime prevention through environmental design plan, SEPTED plan, and subsequent approval of that plan by their police department. That's a nationally recognized program. I know the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department has done those kinds of assessments on our area schools and churches. I think that requiring a plan like that seems reasonable for these facilities to use security best practices that are already established. The operating hours section of the regulatory ordinance, I think it should be taken out. Our planning commission already reviews and sets appropriate operating hours when they review special land uses. I think they should make a determination of what's appropriate based on which zoning district the actual business is in and what they're looking at. There was a section that talks about being a prohibition on selling, soliciting, or receiving orders for marijuana over the internet. I had a question on that. Is that, do you know if that's a state requirement that you can't do that, or was that?
I don't know.
Okay.
It was just in there.
Okay. So if it's not a state requirement, I mean, if it's a state rule that's already in place, then we're kind of, you know, it's already been regulated in that sense. But if it's not a state rule, I'm not sure that that's really necessary. I think, you know, if a business wants to create a web page or a Facebook page, you know, about their medical marijuana business, I don't see a concern with that. And I think this language kind of prohibits that. And maybe there is an online order system which makes pickup and delivery easier, to where we're not dealing with as many folks parking, and it speeds up the transaction process, so we're not dealing with a ton of folks, you know, waiting, which could be a potential concern. You know, certainly the business would still need to make sure that they have, you know, proper controls in place, make sure it's only medical marijuana patients coming and getting the marijuana itself. But you know, that's something that, if it's not a state rule, I'm not sure that that's necessary. The sign restrictions that are in this proposed regulatory ordinance, I think, are way too restrictive. We just went through a sign ordinance update where we got away from content regulation and saying we're not going to regulate content in our relation to signage, and yet this kind of comes back and puts a bunch of regulations on signage. And so I'm not sure that lines up with the goal that we just had with our recent sign ordinance. I think we should just let our sign ordinance that we have be what it is. We don't have restrictions for pharmacies or medical office or dentist offices on the types of signage that they have. I think we should treat these businesses the same in that regard. The penalties piece, you know, if somebody's violating, you know, these provisions, I'm fine with the misdemeanor route versus the civil infraction route. I think it should have some consequence if they're going to violate these provisions. I already talked about the good neighbor plan piece. Another question I think I had, Jennifer, it's probably more for you, and I think I've asked it before. And, well, two questions. One, there was a question about, is it these buffers, is it lot line to lot line or building to building? And then how does that affect potential condominium units?
Right, so I talked to the city attorney about this, and the consensus was that it would be lot line to lot line, not the building. You can expand a building, we've got required setbacks, we don't want to restrict an approval based on what the building is today, and that would potentially prevent the expansion in the future. If they do condo a shopping center, for example, that's a new lot line. So that's a way to avoid the buffering issue. So it's something to keep in mind. So sometimes it will become the building itself.
Okay, fair enough. And then, how do you see, one of the trickier things is if, and I think if we go with some of the sensitive areas kind of buffering, it's going to naturally really dwindle down the number of these that can be in the community, just because we're so limited on land space. I certainly agree with that sentiment. But I think it makes a lottery system a little bit harder on with a buffering system. So I don't know how we, you know, because there's a lot of language in this regulatory ordinance about a lottery system. Not sure how that would work with a buffering. I don't know if you have any ideas on that, or.
So if we don't have separation requirements between the uses, which the Planning Commission didn't have that in their ordinance, the lottery system becomes less meaningful. Mm-hmm. If we don't have a cap on the number of provisioning centers or grow operations we want to have, the lottery system might not serve much purpose.
Right.
We would just take everybody in, we would evaluate whether they meet all of the regulatory standards, we'd set them up for a Planning Commission special use process, and then they could all be approved. If we're looking at having a separation between uses, and we're going to be very careful about, okay, this is the first one in, they need to go through the full special use process. If they get approved, then now we add that buffer to the map. Anybody that was looking to be in that buffer now can't go to that piece of property. They have to find another property.
Right. I think maybe we, you know, there's kind of more of a first come, first served. Do you take it as maybe by zoning district, you know, for a time period, maybe 5 submit, 1 for, you know, whatever zoning district you want to pick. And then you do kind of a lottery from there to say, okay, then you get the first dibs on, where in the zoning district, I guess, that.
Yeah, I had suggested that if we do a lottery, we should mock up a few scenarios to
Yeah,
really test it. Like, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
Some properties are naturally going to be more suitable to these different uses, not just provisioning centers, but all of them. The property's gonna just be in a better location, it's gonna be the right size, they're gonna meet the parking standards more readily, those kinds of things, so.
Fair enough.
But everyone that's speculating on property right now is looking at these draft ordinances. I've gotten many requests to see the draft regulations. So they're already looking at, what kind of access to parking do I have? How can I meet that standard?
Right.
What is the buffer looking like? Am I near a school? If they add a church, how far am I from the closest church?
Fair enough. I'd be interested, I appreciate our planning commissioners being here. I know they seem to have quite a bit of discussion on the buffering essentially, and concerns. So I don't know if, I'm interested at least in them, some of them presenting some of their thoughts on why buffering was something that they chose or felt that it wasn't necessary, but it's up to my fellow council members if they think that's, just because it's come up obviously from each of us, but so far, but.
Well,
I'm fine with that.
and I'd like to get comments from council members, and depending on the time, we can invite planning commissioners forward, but we do intend to have a full-blown public hearing where we can gather comments from the public, including planning commissioners at our next meeting. And so let's see where this conversation goes. I guess, Mike, have you got comments, contributions?
Yeah, to save people from listening to the same thing over and over again, Councilmember Fritz, Scott, Ryan, all have some very great ideas. I agree with a great percentage of them. They were already on my list, but my take through this whole thing has neither been for or against, other than just conservative. And I believe it would probably be in the best interest if we kept it conservatively for the first part. Take some baby steps, see how it works out. We can always expand it to other areas. We can always reduce buffers. We can always take things away that were in there that we maybe find we don't need. But I would rather take that approach and have those things that we can remove than to wish we would have put them in. I don't think growers or processors or safety compliance or transporters is probably going to be an issue for Grand Haven. Some of them will have growers. There's cheaper places to go to grow stuff than city property. The biggest thing I think we'll see is provisioning centers, requests for those. If we're not going to have a buffer between them, then I would like to see probably a maximum number allowed, that subject to change. Everything goes great, we can always increase the number. Public input, I'm more than willing to take anything anybody has to offer and consider it 100%. Like I say, I've neither been for or against, but I would really like to gather all the info I can. Everybody knows I've studied this quite a bit, but there's always something to be learned.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I guess I would address first then the zoning. I generally tend to side with the planning commission on the notion of buffers over and above those required by the state. State requires 1,000 feet from schools and K-12 schools and libraries. And when you start adding more buffers around other uses, it becomes, it can be quite a large collection of potential uses. It depends a lot on the sensibilities of individuals as to what's appropriate and what isn't. But it also means that the reach of one private property use extends into the ability of other private property owners to use their property. So I think you have to be careful about that, as I mentioned when I talked about zoning and setting up an overall plan, and then regulations which then tend to follow that plan, whether people like it or not. Sometimes that's how land use goes. And so my feeling on buffers is that they should be minimal. They should be what's required by state law. If we do go with buffering of other uses, I would hope to see it less than 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet is a number grabbed from the state requirement for schools and libraries. And I don't think that's a magic number, it's just a really big number. But if you look at a typical city block as being on the order of 400 feet long plus a right-of-way, if you're 400 to 500 feet buffers, you're a block away. So you can keep something a block away from a particular use if you think that's important to do. We can consider that, as Mr. Dorr has said, that it's easier to impose that up front and then back off than it is to try to reimpose it later when you decide that there really was a bad outfall from having these uses close to each other or close to uses that you consider sensitive. So on the buffers, I think that I would like to follow the Planning Commission's recommendation, but I would also be open to smaller buffers around other uses if that's the sense of council. And I suspect that it is. So, I mean, there's one direction we could go. A lot of the other things that are in the zoning piece, you watch the time, I've been telling everybody else to watch the time. I think the Planning Commission put a lot of thought into this. They treated it like a lot of other special land use legislation. They established hours of operation, they established ways that facilities should look and how much parking they should have and various things. And as Jennifer said, typically if you meet the requirements of the ordinance, you're going to get your special land use permit. That's just basically how zoning ordinances work. You typically are only turned down if you've missed some detail that's required in the ordinance. And again, I think it's a good objective ordinance. So what's in the zoning piece, I'm mostly happy with. The only thing I didn't like was that they included provisioning centers in neighborhood mixed use. My concern about neighborhood mixed use is that single-family housing is a permitted by right use in the NMU district, and my concern would be that we aren't going to put this in any other residential district. Neighborhood mixed use is a hybrid mix. It's a mix of commercial, residential, a variety of uses. And when we conceived that, way back when we adopted this ordinance, it was kind of a smart cities type concept. It was a way to have mixed uses all living together in one zone. And so the uses that were picked to go together kind of work together. So my concern there would be whether or not we really want the provisioning centers included in a district which also has single-family housing as a permitted use. And the other concern would be that someone may come in to establish a provisioning center, buy up a bunch of houses, tear them down, build a provisioning center, because that might be a cost-effective way to do things that would compromise our housing stock. So I think that's the one piece here that I'm not particularly comfortable with, and we can talk about that as time goes on as well. There again, it's easier to not allow it up front and back into it later. The regulatory piece, I do have a few comments, many of which have already been said by others. Basically, the regulatory piece is how to do an application, how to get picked for a permit, how to get the permit processed. So it's very much of a procedural document. I was concerned about the putting caps or limits on the number of permits that you would allow. We didn't do that with some other things such as the short-term rentals. We looked at doing what caps. No, they're arbitrary. You're pulling a number out of the air. We said we don't want more than this certain number. I don't know quite how you defend that number. It just becomes kind of your best guess. If you do it by separation of units from one to another, you probably have a little more basis, but first you'd have to answer the question as to why you think you want to separate these units from each other. Is it really a bad thing for provisioning centers to be next door neighbors? Would it be better to have them in one place, or do you really want them spread out all over? If you do either of those, caps or separation requirement, I think you're going to be compelled to have a lottery system. Without that, I don't see any point in it. The lottery system would be needed because if the order in which your applications come in determine who gets a permit, I think you need some fair way to pick them. If you say parcel number applicant A is going to pick a spot, applicant B is 600 feet away, that disqualifies him because he's too close to applicant A. Applicant C comes in, he's 600 feet farther away, but he's far enough away from applicant A so applicant A and C can proceed. But then applicant A drops out, applicant B, even though he was earlier, is out of luck. So I think the lottery has value in that situation. I do have a couple more comments. I think that we're awfully close to quitting the special work session and going to our regular session. So I think I'll reserve a few minutes for comments, and maybe another go-around on council here for the place in our agenda where we would complete our special work session. So it is now at 7:29. I'm going to close the special work session. We'll reopen this at the appropriate time in our regular meeting. But for now, we'll close this and then we will slide right into our regular council meeting.
Signs are
And,
limited.
and as everybody comes in, come on in, find a seat.
State rules and laws. Very, very limited as to what they can have.
I don't know. I wish I knew.
Yeah,
Take a look at that.
yeah, it's very, very limited. Nothing that says marijuana, nothing that says, you know, anything.
That's like in the state regulation?
Yeah, it's like 54 pages worth. I have a copy of it at home if you want to know where to go look at it at.
I'll see
But
if I can
yeah,
find it. If I can, I'll take a look at it.
there's a lot in there about signs and advertising and what's allowed, what's not allowed.
Right.
Same thing with a couple of the other things that you had brought up, as far as the right to land search and anything like that. The state already.
Do you need a signal from me?
That's a rule for their people. Their state
Yeah,
regulators.
I'm ready
and
to
state
start.
police.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm waiting, I'm waiting for people to come in.
As far as their people.
It's pretty defined. I mean, they have the state. When you sit down and read that whole thing, page to page. I mean, there's a lot of stuff they have to comply with before they even get to us.
That's Ryan and Lowell. I know that's not O'Brien.
You got 2 seats up here, $20 each.
This is our regular city council meeting, and Linda, would you please call the roll?
Dora,
Here.
Cummins,
Here.
Scott,
Here?
Fritz,
Here.
Manetza.
Here. First, we will have our invocation given by Councilmember Denny Scott, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Shall we pray? Our Father, our God, we give you thanks for the greatest gift in all, providing us with a Savior, Jesus Christ. And because of that gift, you offer to us salvation, that someday we may be able to spend eternity with you. We also thank you for this new year, a year of hope and yet another year of new challenges. We ask for your guidance, we ask for your wisdom. As it says in your word, if anyone lacks wisdom, he should ask of God, and it will be given. And in Proverbs, you tell us wisdom is better than gold. So we seek it from you, our great and eternal God. We also thank you for the privilege of serving here on this city council. And may we never forget we are but servants of this community, striving to keep and make Grand Haven a safe and wonderful place to live and to visit. May you be with us all, of our citizens, and help them and guide them through this new year. May you also be with those who work and serve the city of Grand Haven. And may we never forget to thank them and pray for them, for these are the ones that are keeping us safe and providing us with all the services that we take for granted. We also pray for this year that you'll make it even better than that you did last year. And we do this all in your name. In Jesus Christ, we pray, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, so we have no appointments or presentations this evening?
No, sir.
Okay. So we would look now at the approval of the consent and regular agendas. Any changes to the agendas?
I have none tonight, Your Honor.
Changes by anyone up here?
No.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'd like to make that motion.
Second?
Motion by Fritz, second by Cummins, to approve the consent and regular agendas. Please call the roll.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. At this point in our agenda, we have a call to the audience. This is one of two opportunities. This time, members of the audience may come and address council at any item, whether or not on the agenda. Those addressing council will come to the podium, speak directly to the mayor, must identify themselves by name and address, will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Who would like to come forward?
Bob, were you planning on taking comment at the point we get to the new business item on Chinook Pier? Or were
I
you-
think we could do that, so if you would,
You want to wait until then?
let's do that, because I think that there's going to be some comment on that item.
There might be.
So let's plan on opening the floor when we get to that agenda item, so that it'll all be fresh in everybody's mind when we discuss it. So anything not on the Chinook Pier item?
I'm speaking because the city manager encouraged me not to leave before saying my piece. I don't know what you're all here for, but I don't want to miss the opportunity. I'm here to ask once again that the city of Grand Haven take the climate crisis with great seriousness. And what I want to suggest tonight is that we have a town hall meeting at some point in the future, that you organize, that the newspaper and media publicize, so that we can get as many people in the community out to share all the ideas that I hope we have toward what our community can do. I want to call your attention, if you can Google at some point, Ferguson Township, Pennsylvania, plus energy transition. You can find an article about what a community about the size of ours has done to speak to this problem. We know nationally not much is going to be done. Therefore, the responsibility of cities and communities to take these matters into their own hands is incumbent upon us. I want to also take this moment to advise you of two efforts that I'll be making in the coming months on behalf of this issue. I didn't identify myself. Walter Davis, 209 South 3rd Street.
I was going to ask you that.
You know me already.
We've seen you.
I'm going to be moderating a series of films at the Loudoun Library starting in February, documentary films on different aspects of the climate crisis. And I'm also sponsoring a contest for our middle and high school students with prizes that I'm putting the money up for students in this area, Spring Lake, Ferrysburg, and Fruitport, to present ideas to us about things we might do for climate change. Maybe we have a Greta Thunberg among us. I brought copies of these flyers for these two documents for the 5 of you and the city manager. And so if I can leave that with you, with someone
City
over
clerk.
here, I will now find out what you're all here for. Are you all here to discuss marijuana?
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you very much.
Who else would like to speak?
Tim Dieters, 516 Orchard, Grand Haven. Two things that are coming up in my thought pattern is the review of the short-term rentals. It's now been a couple of years. I'd be interested to see if we could review that and how the numbers have correlated against complaints and whatever, and open that maybe up besides key streets. because other people have been making comments that they didn't think it's fair that they don't have the same opportunity. So I'd like to see if you could address that maybe this year sometime. Second thing is, I've talked to a couple of council members before about additional parking at the beach south of Nodos, either on the east or the west side for the dog park, for the people that walk their dogs. They have to park at the city lot, and if there's any additional, after looking at the beach down there, the top section by the sidewalk could take some angle parking to relieve a little pressure from the city lot just south of that, to let the people with the dogs stay where they belong, down there. So those are my two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'll close the public call to the audience at this point. I'd like to just take a few minutes and continue our work session. I was making a couple of comments about the regulatory piece of the ordinance. I know I could echo a lot of what Ryan had to say, and I think he studied it in more detail than I have. I also took a look at the Muskegon ordinance, and I thought Muskegon's ordinance was a little simpler and easier to follow, but this one is very much a step-by-step process. I commented that I wanted, if we're going to put either caps or separation distances, I think we needed to think carefully about how arbitrary that might be and what the purpose of it might be. And I was concerned that putting separation distances between provisioning centers didn't necessarily serve any purpose. But what it did do is it forced you to choose applicants basically on the order they come in, because then now they can interfere with each other. I was concerned about a few specific pieces of language here that I mentioned to Pat, which are really kind of minor. The piece about the inspections. I'm always concerned when I see that the city or any government has granted itself the ability to make basically random searches at any time at their own convenience. And I think it carries with it a presumption of guilt. I think it carries a presumption that whoever you want to inspect is automatically doing something wrong, and you better get in there and check on them. I think when somebody is brand new at it, it's easy to make mistakes, in which case you want to correct mistakes. But somebody who has been operating, whether it's a provisioning center or some other medical marijuana facility, and there's no suspicion that they're doing something wrong, that there's no good reason to just impose random, as it says here, random and unannounced examinations of the facility. So I think that invites harassment, whether we intended it to be that way or not. I think you have to be careful about going there. I think there's a reason why there's a prohibition against random search and seizure for most constitutional reasons. This one has more to do with a permit, so I think it's appropriate for us to have some ability to inspect. But I think we need to be reasonable, and I think we need to be somewhat predictable and somewhat respectful, unless we have cause to think there's something wrong. Now, if you wanted to incorporate this in a probationary period and say that because you're brand new or because you've had a problem, we're going to search you more, we're going to inspect you more frequently, I can understand that. But just to do it in a blanket manner like this, I would like to see this either associated with a probationary period or see it become something which is a more reasonable and predictable manner of when inspections would be done. Like I say, I think that when you automatically assume that somebody is doing something wrong because of the stigma associated with the product they're selling or the service they're performing, that you invite arbitrariness and heavy-handedness of government. So that's my thought on that. The local ownership, I can see value in having a certain component of local ownership. To require 75% of local ownership, I think, is unrealistic. Having some percentage as a threshold may be valuable. Where I see that coming into play isn't so much a qualification for putting in an application as it would be if you were doing a selection such as a lottery process, where you might give preferential treatment to those who have a local component. Maybe choose from them first, and if you have more applications available, choose from the rest of them. If you don't have a cap and you're just going by the zoning districts and the land use aspect of it, then you don't need a lottery and you don't need this particular provision. I can see value in local ownership because those are the people who know the community, but I can also see where this is, it could be, as Councilman Cummins indicated, a straw man type operation where you have a front guy who's just the local contact. It may be meaningless, it may be something that just kind of distorts the process. So I'd be careful about that. I would certainly lower the percentage from 75% down to more like 25 or 33%, something on that order. I was curious about the next provision, which has a restriction on transfer of the permit. It isn't transfer of the permit, it's transfer the permit holder. Basically, somebody gets a permit, sits on it, sells their business to someone else, so the permit goes with, because you can't transfer a permit. But if you're the permit holder and you transfer who that permit holder is, I guess that's a way around it. I don't know why it says in here 30 months instead of 12 months, because the permits are only good for 12 months. So I kind of understand the logic there, but I think that needs a little more thought. And I certainly think that 30-month time period should be thought about. I agree with the comments that our zoning ordinance already contains a lot of these provisions, well established there and consistent with other land use regulations, such as signs. I don't see why you'd repeat the same condition in both places. I think that there's something in here about state requirements and meeting state requirements. Pre-qualification is already a requirement in the zoning piece. I think pre-qualification at the state level should precede most any processing of any application. So if that's in place, people have already cleared a hurdle, and it saves us from clearing people who haven't cleared that hurdle. So I think pre-qualification should be looked at throughout this regulatory ordinance as a piece that would precede accepting an application. I was concerned about the provision that a description of all equipment methods will be employed to stop any impact to adjacent uses, including enforceable assurances that no odor will be detectable from outside the permitted premises. I'd be interested how you're measuring the no odor detectable. If it's just to the average person, can they tell if they smell it? They may not, they may be particularly sensitive. When we look at things such as noise intrusion or light intrusion from one property to another, we have ways of measuring it. You can measure foot candles of light, or you can measure the sound level. And if you brought in your German Shepherd dog, or if you brought in specialized instruments, you can probably detect odor almost anywhere. So no odor detectable needs to be clarified as to what you mean by that, how it's measured. And zero odor or zero of anything is really pretty much impossible to get to. So I would be skeptical anytime somebody says no odor detectable, that's got to be a meaningful statement, a measurable statement, and something that's not an impossible hurdle to achieve. Again, we have things in here which I think are covered in our zoning, such as site plan review. This talks a lot about how to set up and conduct your lottery. Whether or not we need a lottery depends on other pieces that we may or may not include in our zoning piece, such as the buffering or the caps on numbers of uses. I was concerned about denial of application. It says that basically if you get an application that's got anything at all wrong with it, you throw it away. It doesn't seem to offer anybody an opportunity to correct simple errors. Certainly if somebody's misrepresenting or lying on their application, you should throw that one away. But if somebody simply omitted something or forgotten something, I would think you give them a chance to fix it. But the language in here says no. Other stuff, just to kind of, again, I appreciate the comments of other council members. Talked about spacing of these things. Violations. This one has both misdemeanors and civil infractions. Typically violations of our zoning ordinance or other local ordinances are going to be civil infractions. I think that's appropriate for most things that would be errors or mistakes or violations of these regulatory ordinances. That civil infraction would be the most appropriate level. If we had to choose one or the other, I think I'd go with that. But I do think we should choose one or the other. And then the idea that there are progressive fines, we might want to look at the level of those fines and what it means to have a repeat offense. But my thought would be a civil infraction rather than a misdemeanor. It's not necessarily a criminal offense if they've missed something in the performance under the regulations. There again, if somebody's deliberately lying or breaking the law, we're going to take their permit and put them out of business. That's most of what I had on the regulatory piece and on these others. I do intend to take comment in 2 weeks from tonight, and I know some planning commissioners came tonight. I would appreciate if they could come and share their thoughts at that time. I don't want to extend the work session by opening the floor to members of the audience at this point in time, but I would invite other council members if you have something else that you'd like to say before we move on our agenda. Anything?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, in that case,
Oh, fine.
I think we've all given feedback to staff and spoken our thoughts to the public, but we will hear from you guys in 2 weeks, and I hope that we get good public feedback at that point in time. We're trying very hard to make this an open and transparent process, because it will be one that isn't necessarily comfortable for everyone, but it will be something that many members of our community would like to see proceed. So, thank you for that. Now we'll get back to our regular agenda. So, next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Linda?
This is to approve the special work session and regular council meeting minutes of December 16th, 2019. Approve the bills memo in the amount of $991,458.13. Approve a resolution of recognition for Bonnie Suchecki for over 10 years of service to the city of Grand Haven. Adopt a bridge of the Municipal Employees Retirement System of Michigan Defined Benefit Plan multiplier from 2.25% to 1.75% and adjust the employee and employer contribution rate to 14.77% effective July 1st, 2020 for the SEIU employee group, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Approve a grant application in the amount of $10,000 to the Grand Haven Area Community Foundation for technical assistance to help develop a consensus design plan for the Grand Trunk Depot building, including a $3,500 local match. Approve an agreement with Progressive AE to provide phases 1 through 3 of a proposal dated November 21st, 2019, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Approve budget amendments and a deficit elimination plan for the Marina Fund and submit budget amendments, resolution, and a letter to the state of Michigan. Approve budget amendments and a deficit elimination plan for the Local Streets Fund and submit budget amendments, resolution, and a letter to the state of Michigan. And approve budget amendments and a deficit elimination plan for the Chinook Pier Fund and submit budget amendments, resolution, and a letter to the state of Michigan.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Motion by Scott, second by Dora. Comments, questions on the consent agenda?
On item E, Progressive A&E, what is their expertise coming to a historic building? Have they done a lot of historic buildings? Have they designed, have they done extensive work on them? What is their
They do. They've
credentials?
got quite a background in doing that. Most On Point is a building they did in Grand Rapids, just I think it's south of the Van Andel Arena, and I forget the name of the building. Bob and I went and looked at it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a former depot building itself.
Yeah, it's a former depot in downtown Grand Rapids, and they redid the whole thing, put in new windows.
Kitty corner from Pepino's, that's how I remember it.
There you go. Kitty corner from Pepino's. But they did a wonderful job, and that's just one of many, but they also have a great sensibility about what we're trying to do down on our waterfront, having worked with us on the stadium. They're familiar with the site and the interests, and I think they'd be good to hopefully bring all the different concepts out and get some consensus built so we can move forward with a renovation project in the depot.
So we didn't take bids out for this, we're just going to go with them.
Nope, we did not take bids. We used them, like I said, for the stadium project, and we're proposing a similar type design build approach. They also were the company that we sat down with the museum board when we originally sat and discussed the future of that building with the museum board, so we thought they were the best firm to get a quote from.
Very good.
Ed, did they also commit to bringing in additional expertise as needed?
As needed, yeah.
So I think that the, what they call the depot committee now, which used to be the stadium committee, is kind of shepherding this process, and they have no authority other than advisory authority to us.
Okay.
And I know that there are members of that committee who are intensely interested in the integrity of the depot.
Very good.
Anything else?
On the regular council meeting minutes, under the approval of consent regular agendas, there was a piece about adding my appointment to the NORA board there. That actually occurred at the December 2nd meeting, so just taking that out. And then under the worship on the waterfront section of those minutes, and I apologize, maybe it didn't come across as clear. Right now it kind of reads that I was not in favor of a for-profit organization renting the facility and them taking a percentage of the sales. My concern was that, was with us taking a percentage of the ticket sales if they're already paying to rent the facility out. So I just want to make sure that that's kind of clear and that language there.
What page are you on? Do you know what page of the minutes?
Under the new business worship on the waterfront, page 5.
Okay.
Question on the Chinook Pier deficit elimination plan. I'm assuming that the rental revenue numbers may potentially be is I don't know if he's here tonight, or I assume that the rental revenue numbers may be affected based on decisions that are made tonight. Will we still have a compliant deficit elimination plan if those numbers are altered substantially, or are we looking at more transfer there from?
This deficit elimination plan was written with what we knew at the time, say last week. So last week there hadn't been any decisions made. We talked about that quite a bit, and Amy Bessinger is here tonight. We certainly covered that and said, you know, we're best off, let's just go with the plan we have now. We get more information later, then we, you know, deal with that in our budget process for the coming year and then address it accordingly. So yeah, if you make some decisions and the revenue picture changes dramatically, which it may, we'll then have to address that in our coming year's 2021 budget.
Okay, so as far as we're concerned, we'd be sending a compliant plan to the state then for
It's compliant for now.
that fund.
Yeah,
Correct.
based on what we know today, but tomorrow it could be a little different.
Okay. Okay, yeah, and just obviously looking at the marina deficit elimination plan, I mean, obviously some good transfers there from the general fund, but I understand that we have to present a compliant plan to the state, but that's a lot of money there for the marina operations coming out of our general fund for sure. So, but that's all I have.
Okay. Anyone else?
Good.
Okay. Believe we're ready to vote?
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. This is a public hearing from a rezoning action recommended by the Planning Commission. I don't know, Linda, do you want to read this?
I can.
Okay.
This is to open a public hearing regarding the rezoning of 215 North Beacon Boulevard, 714 Elliott Avenue, 222 North 7th Street, 729 Fulton Avenue, 727 Fulton Avenue, 721 Fulton Avenue, 719 Fulton Avenue, and 715 Fulton Avenue from neighborhood mixed use to commercial zoning district.
Okay, and the reason this is a public hearing at this point is because there was some people who were not notified of the public hearing for the Planning Commission, and so we scheduled a public hearing here. Ordinarily, we wouldn't do this here, but to move this along and to give everybody the correct notification of public hearing, those parties who were missed before were notified. So if anybody who would care to address council on this public hearing on this issue, please step forward. Seeing none, I would close the public hearing. Okay, I think this is my first public hearing since I've been mayor. Do we need to vote to close the public hearing, or do I just do it?
No.
Okay, some bodies do.
We do not.
Okay, public hearing is closed, so I guess I would like for Jennifer to step forward and explain this case to us.
Jennifer Howland, Community Development Manager. This is a zoning change request for several parcels on the west side of Beacon Boulevard that are owned by the same ownership interests, and they're all represented here tonight if you have questions for them. They own the car wash and Quick Lube, and they're looking to expand the car wash operation, but in the neighborhood mixed-use district, that's a non-conforming use, so you can't expand it. When I met with them several months ago, we talked through that process, and I gave them some options to look at potentially rezoning the property, looking at certain parcels, or all of them. And they decided to propose to rezone all 8 parcels that you see on the screen. They're all on the same block and they're contiguous. The commercial district is, there's a zoning map that I have it, we can put on the screen. The commercial district is to the immediate south and to the immediate east across Beacon Boulevard. But we are starting to gradually move into this neighborhood mixed-use district where it was mentioned earlier this evening that it is a mixed-use district. You know, you've got single-family homes, you have retail, you have office operations, all mixed together, and including on this block, we have several single-family homes. Most of them are owned by the applicant, but there is one home to the immediate west that would be kind of in an island of commercial if those homes on Fulton were removed for a larger expansion of the car wash. So it's really important to note that this rezoning request is not just about what the car wash may be in the future. There's another process they could have pursued if they just wanted to do a car wash expansion and limit their potential uses to just a car wash. They elected to propose to have full commercial district opportunities for their properties, which is fine for them to request. One of the things that from a staff and planning commission perspective that we looked at was what the future land use map of the city says. The map you see here on the screen is the zoning districts of today. So the other thing that we look at is the future land use map. What is the community intent for this area? All of the red that you see on the screen now, that's supporting the continuation and actual expansion of the neighborhood mixed use zoning district. The green in the northeast quadrant, that's the service/commercial future land use district, which would support a commercial district rezoning. This is not the only thing we look at as planners, but it's a really important policy guide for us. So the zoning map would show that it's a contiguous rezoning, which means it's not just a little island of commercial that they're asking for. It would continue on where commercial is next door. But it is indicating with the future land use plan that we are starting to move into what is not proposed to be commercial. It's meant to be more of a mixed use development. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing in December. They recommended the rezoning with a vote of 6-1. So we had 7 members out of our 9-member board. The dissenting vote was made by Mike Westbrook, who advocated for omitting the residential parcels from the rezoning request. Those are the ones that front on Fulton, and that would keep the integrity of the residential portion of the block intact. But the majority of the Planning Commission elected to move forward with the full request. When we see these kinds of changes, it's showing a transition potentially of the neighborhood, but we do need to keep in mind how far the city council is interested in seeing that transition move. Yes, it's right on Beacon Boulevard, but again, there are homes right there. So I was interested in seeing if we had any extra public comments today, which I don't see that we have, but we did get some input during the public hearing at Planning Commission.
Okay. And I take it we had no further correspondence since that public hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
I just wanted to verify which of these lots are owned by the applicant.
All of them that are highlighted.
All of those that are highlighted are owned by the applicant?
Correct.
Okay.
And then there's another property owner that owns 3 parcels, I believe, on the block. The everything but the one on the northernmost part of 7th Street is owned by another entity, Mr. Lystra.
And then that other one, is that Reliant Cleaning
Yes.
building?
It's owned by somebody else.
Yes, it is, Pat.
Okay.
Mr. Lystra was concerned about this rezoning request. He was one of the people that spoke at the public hearing because the longer list of allowable uses in the commercial district gave him concern. It could be more than just a car wash. It could be something completely different. So anything in that commercial district would be open to them to pursue if it's rezoned.
Well, that's always the consideration in a rezoning. There's quite a long list of permitted uses. And a future owner of that property could do anything on that list. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
That house, Jennifer, the house just to the west of that, the one on Fulton Street, that's gonna stay mixed use, is that right?
It would stay neighborhood mixed use, yes.
And everything up to it would be commercial?
Yes.
From the east, okay.
Ashley, would you change it to the zoning map, please? Thank you. Yeah, so those highlighted 8 parcels would become red, commercial district.
This is basically going against our planning then, isn't it?
It goes, it's not supported by the future land use map of the master plan.
I thought.
Beacon Boulevard goes through several different zoning districts going north to south through town.
Yes, it does.
That it does. Brian or Mike, you both were recent planning commissioners.
I attended the meeting, I think as well as you two, that where the planning commission reviewed this, discussed it pretty thoroughly and came to their conclusion. I don't really see anything that I would change for that.
Jennifer, you noted in your report to us that you would hold off on making a recommendation until after the public hearing tonight. Do you have a particular staff recommendation on this?
So I agree with Mike that there was a thorough discussion at Planning Commission. I think that there are good points on both sides of it. As a planner, it gives me pause when our future land use map doesn't support a rezoning, but we are on the border of 2 different zoning districts, so that's going to start to happen as the neighborhood evolves. The future land use map was not really reviewed in that last master plan update that we did a few years ago, almost 5 years ago now. It was more about resiliency planning. We didn't get into that future land use map very much, or the sub-area planning efforts. So I think we'll look at that again in our next update. I think we'll have to look at it in 2020. So these are just transitional areas. We just need to be careful as if we have to zoom out a little bit more, think about not just what that property owner is interested in, how are these changes going to affect the immediate neighborhood. And as long as you're comfortable in general with the Beacon Boulevard corridor becoming more commercialized, the homes that have been close to Beacon may start to be pushed away, converted into offices, perhaps demolished. It's just something you need to be aware of. So I don't have a strong recommendation either way. I just trying to present the information.
One of our goals is housing that's affordable too, and by taking more housing stock away, it's even more tougher, you know, it tightens the market up even more. You gotta really think about that. Right next to the property is a house there's a laundromat, and does Ed own the house right next door also?
There's the laundromat and then another house Mr. Lystra owns.
Yep, and he also owns the other house on the other side, so there are still homes in that area. Then there's also 1, 2, 3 more homes or 2 more homes on that.
Right, the homes that are in the proposed rezoning area would become non-conforming. They could continue to be used as a home but can't be expanded.
Yeah, but it could be just wiped out. I'm kind of mixed on this whole thing because here we are trying to be affordable housing, you know, housing that's affordable. I shouldn't say affordable housing, but housing that's affordable. And then we're trying to do commercial here too on it, and we're wiping out more of our stock. I'm very kind of pulled on it a little bit. Seeing that I know there's 2 homes that are still on there, they're going to be gone. If you just keep going, it's just going to expand. It's like, like a cancer. You know, you start one place and pretty soon it just keeps moving over. How far do you want to go? you gotta be very careful on what you do and how we do this, so. I'm kind of pulled on this pretty much.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Mike. Planning Commissioner Ellenboe, he pointed that out during the discussion on this case as well, that, you know, he did vote in favor of recommending this, but did note that we're losing more housing stock here, and that affordable housing is a concern of ours, and we're losing more with this, and here in this case, we're flipping the nonconformity from the business being non-conforming, we're allowing that to be a conforming, but then the homes to the south will become non-conforming, so they can't make any improvements anymore. And so essentially those houses are gonna go, the idea is they'll go away over time, and then if we do this zoning change. Jennifer, you mentioned kind of a compromise approach to rezone the parcels that do not front on Fulton, and then keep and that would keep the homes at least conforming from now, the ones on Fulton, at least for the time being, and then later they could come with a new rezoning request if they wanted to do an expansion or some other kind of use for those particular southern parcels, correct?
Yes, that's an option if the city council wants to rezone the northern portion and keep the parcels on Fulton neighborhood mixed use. That's an interim step. I know the owner has some plans for the car wash, potentially adding some new vacuums along the northern end. That's something that could be accomplished if it's rezoned to the commercial district. And then if they do have larger plans in the future, we could revisit this rezoning request, perhaps with a proposed site plan that you could really visualize what they're intending to do, and you can evaluate it more carefully with, here's what the car wash is proposed to be, or whatever it is that they're interested in doing with their property. That's an option. Something else that we're looking at in our zoning ordinance update that we're in the middle of right now is allowing some type of residential in the commercial district. So maybe residential above office or retail, or maybe apartment development, some kind of higher density residential. At this point, the commercial district allows no kind of residential. So things are always changing.
Yeah, that's good. Glad to hear that. I think that's, yeah.
So if we allowed them to have the parcels that they were talking about that are just to the north, that would accomplish what they're looking to do now.
They're not gonna say.
There's definite limitations. It's a small property.
We've done norm camps.
You want to come up to the podium?
Yep, come up and identify yourself.
Norm Camp's one of 3 owners that purchased it in August. Our plan is to have the flexibility, and our intentions today are not to tear the houses down. But our plans have been to improve the interior. The second plan is to put the vacuums in. Along with that, we realize we need some parking and stuff like that. So it's very, very tough to accommodate everything that we need on the current 3 lots that we would be looking at. That's why moving forward, we would prefer to have everything, or we need everything to be commercial in order to make the initial plans work for us. So.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure I understand that that's because of the buffers that's required between the residential zoned and the commercial zoned?
Correct. I mean, it's, you know, we're fine with the way it's developed now, but if our plans expand and we grow.
You need to hit the microphone. Nobody can, only us can hear you.
If our plans grow as they have been, customers have been coming in, the current site might not facilitate the current location. But our current plans have been to use the current building, but to add the vacuums that are currently at our other 3 locations that we have. So, and then, right, you know, with our current addition that we're doing in Muskegon, we're adding 30 feet. In order for us to do something like that and keep some of the houses, we could do that type of a thing. I realize housing is a key element to Grand Haven from many discussions with Jennifer and everything else. So our initial plans are basically to work with our current size, but have the flexibility if we grow tenfold that we have been, that we need that flexibility.
Thank you. So my thought on this is that you understand that the houses will become non-conforming in the new zone if we do rezone it. And as such, they cannot be expanded, the non-conforming can't be expanded, basic repairs only could be done. Continuing to use them, thinking that they'll be there a long time, kind of limited, and compromises financing you might get for a residential use there, and you're basically preserving the land for expansion. And my question to Jennifer might be, was there any thought of adding car washes to the NMU list of uses? And would that have solved the problem, or would there be other setbacks that would kick in that would also be a problem?
We did briefly talk about that as a text amendment. They did elect to go forward with the commercial district rezoning, but that's an option to look at simply, nothing simple, but adding that as an allowable land use, a special use, I'm sure.
But, so if we do this rezoning, that makes that a moot point. We won't need to pursue that any further. If there were an option, you might have avoided this rezoning.
Yes, it definitely is an option.
Okay. But since nobody chose to pursue that, here we are.
Yes, the applicant chose to propose the rezoning, so that's what we have been processing for them.
Okay, my sense on the housing is that sooner or later, those houses are going to be absorbed into this business, because that seems to be the intent of the property owner. Property owner understands he's creating a nonconformity, which he owns. And as far as the master plan goes, I am generally a supporter of the master plan. I'm also aware that future land use plans are painted with a broad brush, and that when you go parcel by parcel with future land use plans, you're usually not giving them due credit. They're supposed to be a broader plan than not across this street, not across this line. That's really not how they're intended to work. But the general sense of it is that you want certain mixes of uses in certain areas, and the ability to rezone across parcels which are contiguous with other districts is kind of the evolution of the area. So I'll support this because I think the applicant and the property understands. And I don't think the houses would be there a long time anyway to solve our housing crisis. The only other question I would have too is be that if we only rezoned what we thought we should rezone and not what the applicant wants, and then later the applicant says, oh, I'm ready for that next rezoning, is he going to have to pay again to apply and go through this process?
I guess it depends on how long he waits.
Okay. Because we're going to incur...
The work is all still fresh, you just change the date on the staff report, no, there'd be no reason for that, other than the cost for doing another public hearing notification. That takes up about half of our plan application fees. That's why you increased them last fiscal year, because we've got a lot of notification requirements for that.
Well, our choice to do something the applicant doesn't want to do would incur costs eventually for, I believe.
Yep, so we could definitely look at that if that was the route that was taken.
And it's an extra step down the road, so I guess I don't see any compelling reason to say no to this one. That's my thought. Anyone else?
Are we looking at this in our zoning ordinances we're looking at right now? Are we looking at changing that possibility, or it might be, or?
For the residential component in the commercial district?
Yeah.
I would not likely be recommending single-family housing in the commercial district, but multifamily housing, residential above commercial, yes, that's on our list of things to look at. We have some larger parcels, especially along Beacon Boulevard, that could potentially support some taller buildings, some upper story residential. So it's in the mix of what we're looking at.
Since there was other options that he could have went and done, and also we're possibly looking forward, I'm not in favor of this at all, to be honest with you. Not at this time. I'd like to see what are we gonna look at in the future there, and how our ordinances comes up.
Other comments? Are we ready to vote?
Actually, I never did a motion and second.
Oh.
Okay, we only opened and closed the public hearing, didn't we?
Yep.
Okay, we'd like to
all this
make
discussion, not legally, huh?
Do I have to repeat it?
Thanks, Bob.
That was pretty lengthy. Who'd like to make a motion so that we can proceed?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Dora, second by Cummins. Any other comments on, questions on the motion? Call the vote.
Scott?
No.
Fritz?
No.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, we'll move into new business.
First item under new business is to advise tenants at Chinook Pier that the buildings will not be available for occupancy in the spring of 2020, and they should therefore plan accordingly pending a final decision by the City Council. The administration recommends approval.
Can we have a motion? It's on our agenda. We approve the agenda.
Motion.
Second?
Okay, motion by Dora, second by Cummins. You've read the agenda item, and I've offered to open the floor for comment at this point in time. So let's do that. Would it be appropriate to read this resolution before we take that comment?
Would you like us to read the full resolution?
Please do, because that way people can gather their thoughts on what it is we're proposing.
And I'd like Ashley to just put up a timeline of what's transpired thus far with the Chinook Pier discussion. Whereas the City of Grand Haven owns 3 buildings on North Harbor Drive, commonly referred to as Chinook Pier retail shops, and whereas following evidence of mold present in Suite A4 and reports of mold in Building B, follow-up tests revealed the presence of mold in air samples in all 3 buildings. Whereas Chinook Pier approved a contract for $25,753 on August 28th to remediate airborne mold conditions in all 3 buildings. And whereas in the fall of 2019, after expending most of the budget for all 3 buildings on only 1 suite, the contractor advised that conditions were still not acceptable for reoccupancy of Suite A4. And whereas professionals at ServPro, the remediation contractor, Fishbeck Thompson Carr and Huber, the air quality testing consultant, Capstone Property Management, the property manager, Michigan Township Participating Plan, our liability carrier, and Dickinson Wright, the city attorney, advised that the building should not be occupied in its current condition. And whereas in the fall of 2019, the city received estimates to remediate and restore the entire property, and the timeline for replacement would likely exceed 6 months. And whereas on December 19th, 2019, a meeting was held to share this information with tenants, and whereas in January of 2020, the City Council is considering either full remediation of some of the building space, or no remediation and demolition of the buildings. Now therefore be it resolved that tenants be advised that the buildings will not be available for occupancy in the spring of 2020, and they should therefore plan accordingly pending a final decision by the City Council.
All right, and then the timeline you can see up there. I think at this point, if there are no objections from council, I'll open the floor for comments. Please treat this like a call to the audience and identify yourself by name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Anybody?
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and Mr. Pat McGinnis, I'm Russell Roberts, owner of Dairy Cream Chinook Pier, Building C. You will be voting tonight on the future of Dairy Cream and all the Chinook Pier tenants. Not just our business's future, but that of our employees and my wife and I. Dairy Cream has been in Building C and a family business almost from the day it has been built. We love Grand Haven, and with our staff, we love serving our customers every summer. Now you are deciding the fate of our future tonight. We are told that we are going to be removed from our buildings due to mold. But according to your report from FTC&H, they did not make any mention of mold being found in Building C. They did not feel they needed to take any surface samples either. The only mention was dampness in the crawl space. They then took airborne samples, and according to FTC&H, it indicated that there was not significant difference between indoor and outdoor samplings in Building C. The city's original quote from ServPro did not include any work to be done in Building C for mold remediation. Now I am being told that we have mold because of the airborne sample, and specifically the Penicillium aspergillus, if I said that right. I hired Environmental Resource Group to review the airborne sample results. And he said, and I'm quoting from his, analysis, it's rough getting old. Analysis of the air sample collected from within dairy cream tenant space identified several common types of mold spores regularly found outdoor as well as indoors. No unique molds indicative of interior mold growth, aka Stachybotrys, etc., were found in the sample tested. Furthermore, comparison of the mold levels detected to generally accepted mold levels documented in scientific literature revealed that levels below 1,000 to 2,000 counts per cubic meter with less than 700 counts per cubic meter of Penicillium aspergillus would be indicative of a clean building. Thus, the detected mold levels in dairy cream tenant space would not be considered a concern. A copy of the mold test results were reviewed as presented as Attachment 1. Conclusions and recommendations based on ERG's review of FTC and H mold testing results. ERG does not consider the dairy cream tenant space to be impacted with elevated levels of mold. Should you have questions on the above or need further information, feel free to give us a call. Sincerely, Environmental Resource Group, Robert C. Anderson, Senior Project Consultant. And Nautical Knots had even less mold types and quantities than dairy cream had on that day that those airborne tests were taken. So my question is, why are we being kicked out of my space under these circumstances? And I will hand you a letter from my lawyer and also a copy of the review from from the person we had hired.
If you could give that to Linda, she'll make copies for all of us. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and Mr. Pat McGinnis. I'm Renee Roberts from Dairy Cream and Building C. I would just like to take a minute to talk about Russ and I and our business. Russ and I have been married for almost 38 years and have been in business working together for those 38 years. Dairy Cream is an established business who has been in its location for well over 30 years. Its location, the people, including owners and employees over the years, the products we sell, and our equipment make up our business. It has taken us 10 years to pay off the purchase of this business, and we have invested even more in the business over the past 14 years. In the last 3 years, we have spent over $41,000 for 2 new ice cream machines to better serve our customers. What you are proposing today is taking away our business, our income, our way of life, and leaving us with only our equipment. This would be devastating to Russ and I. In driving to Chinook Pier today, it was very sad to already see businesses moving and going out of business. It has already affected the Chinook Pier area. Our big issue is, why are you removing us if the test results are not showing mold in our building? So I urge you to vote no on Resolution A and to allow Building C to remain open. This would decrease the competition for tenants wanting to go into the depot building and would then allow for more Chinook Pier tenants to remain in business. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There's one.
While we're waiting for Chris, I just wanted to ask Renee, how many years did you say you had been there, Renee?
We've been there, this will be our 14th season.
14th season, thank you.
Hi, my name's Chris Gerard. This is my wife, Laura Gerard, and she is the owner of Surf Shop in Building B. So I typed up some stuff because I tend to use a little bit different language, so I'm just going to read it. Hello, my name is Chris Gerard, and my wife owns Surf Shop at Chinook Pier Building B. She bought the business 2 years ago to help supplement our family income, along with investing in our community. Surf Shop was established in 1984 as one of the anchor stores at Chinook Pier, in case people didn't know. Although we are devastated that our building has become untenable, we understand that Mother Nature can be crazy. And no matter what the cause, 11 businesses are left scrambling to find another building to operate in. We spent the majority of the last few weeks wondering if we would have to close our doors for good rather than reopen in an undesirable location. We have fortunately secured a new location in the first block of Washington. We would like to bring attention to the positive communication coming from the city manager's office. We also know that the forthcoming decision facing the city council will be a difficult one. I'd also like to express our disappointment over the post of a current city council member on Grand Haven Informed. This post, in effect, stole the shop owners of their own announcement in regards to their business moving. We were respecting the city's decision-making process by not saying anything to our friends or families about what the potential issues are down at Chinook Pier. Not only that, it caused consternation for the people that were employed at Chinook Pier. This obviously opened the door to a myriad of comments full of guesses and conjecture. I would implore the City Council to think about the consequences to others before wielding the power of social media. We chose to decline commenting. Oh, I already said that, sorry. We chose not to make any comments to our friends, families, and other business owners out of respect for the process. I just wish that the current City Council member that posted that on Grand Haven Informed would have thought about the 11 business owners that had to go on and defend themselves before an official announcement has been made. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Gerard. I live at 1035 Washington. As Chris said, I own the surf shop, and although we have found a home in downtown, in starting this business, I worked at 2 of the other shops down at Chinook Pier a few years before I had the opportunity to buy the surf shop. So it's become a family. I've had the store owners around me give me sage advice of businesses that they've been down there a long time. And so you really need to consider that all of the business owners and 2 business owners who were going to be there in the future are all members of this community. They all employ other people in this community. We do have people that come down specifically to our shops in the summer from other communities. And so this is a trickle effect. I know you have to face the monetary issue, but you also need to consider the human issue of the other people who are scrambling to save their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you.
You knew I couldn't stay away, right? Hello.
We knew.
I'm Kelly Larson, Temptations, 301 North Harbor, Building A. In 1985, the year after Chinook Pier was built, this 15-year-old applied at Temptations for her first job. I bet most of you don't know that story. So I have been at Chinook Pier since 1985. My parents bought it in 1989. Through many years after that, we owned a candy shop. That's where we learned how to make our caramel corn and fudge that we make now at Sweet Temptations. We owned a t-shirt shop, and we had a coffee shop. So we've been in lots of different spaces at Chinook Pier. The allure of why I went there and why I fell in love with Chinook Pier is because it's Grand Haven, right? You know, it's that love of our waterfront, and it's the gateway to our city. We are proud to carry this tradition on, and we've heard comments, you own other stores, you'll be okay. This is our flagship store. This is our busiest store. This is who defines us and who we are. And I think it also helps define who Grand Haven is. I appreciate you moving quickly, which is a hard process. we appreciate the cooperation and information that we've been given. And like many other tenants, we would like to come back to Chinook Pier as well. And I know that's 100 steps down the line, but thank you for putting this on the agenda so fast and making a quick decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Kristen Favreau, and I own Peace Frogs on Chinook Pier at 301 North Harbor. This year would be our 23rd year on Chinook Pier. Thank you, Ashley, for all you have done in the open communication. We know that this is huge for you, and you've really been great communicating. We appreciate that. Just like Kelly had stated, as well as Chris, I mean, we love Chinook Pier. I've been working on Chinook Pier since 1996. We know, all of our neighbors, charter boat captains, we can tell you generations of people that have come into our stores, and we're also your biggest tourism advocates. We can tell you exactly what to do in Grand Haven. We can tell you where to go, who's open, who's not, and if they're coming into my store for something, we can tell them if we don't have it, where to go. All the shops downtown are like that, or in our complex, and we are a big family. Here and there, spats and whatnot, and we are high maintenance in the summer, but we're only open for a few years, or for a few months, excuse me. We would love to come back to Chinook Pier. There's nothing more gratifying than looking at water every day, or being able to go out and sit at a picnic table to do your orders with your rep, or to see the kids play and draw with chalk, or to blow bubbles, or to play games on the picnic tables. We want people to enjoy the pier. We want people to love Grand Haven as much as we do. And Russ and Renee, if Building C is able to stay open, we would like them to be able to carry on for the next season until it is rebuilt, if you vote on whatever you decide to. But if it's able to, at least one of the buildings to stay open, then please let them stay open if the mold isn't an issue. I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Habanowski. I live in Grand Rapids, hopefully not for too much longer. We'd rather be here. I am the owner-to-be of Grand Haven Beach Company. I started building 2.5 years ago. Not because I wanted to own a business per se, although I do. I wanted a reason to be in Grand Haven. And again, ditto, Ashley, you've been awesome. Pat, big decisions. I'm impressed by the movement of the city and your concern. And there's economics, there's all sort of things to consider. Aside of my own business, yeah, I want to open, whether it's there or somewhere else. I love this city. I've been coming here for years. I've been to the beach to enjoy, to relax, to cry when I'm going through stuff. I'm more concerned about the decision that might come out of this, whether I get to open this year or not, is that those buildings down there, they're a continuous attraction to this city. When you walk down up the channel here, do you stop and turn right at Washington Street, or do you have a reason to go forward? What happens if those buildings are gone and don't come back? What happens to the miniature golf, the farmer's market? What happens to the charter boaters, the paddle boater? What happens to all them? New condo complex being considered for across the street. When developers come in and look at the area, they look at your cemeteries, they look at your city landscaping, they look at your entry corridors. What will they say when they want to put condos in, but there's this big gap down there? So I'm confident that all of you will make the right decision. I know you all love this city because you wouldn't be here otherwise. I love this city, we all love this city, and thank you for your tough decisions, your comments and all that, but I hope that economically it'll be feasible, especially with all the other water issues you have. But I think of the eyesore, the gap in our attractions of this town that I love so much, that even if my store never opened, I'll still be here every day in the summer buying ice cream in Building C. Seth's, is it the Seth's favorite? That's what I always get, so thank you for your time.
Thank you. . 。  . 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . .
My name's Larry Wilson. I'm the father of Barefoot Dave, and I'm here representing him. We've been there 14 years now. We were there before Capstone, and Dave has built a heck of a business down there, mainly on hard work and being the type of person he is. He's got a following in this town and in the whole Midwest. Actually, I opened a store down in Saugatuck. And it's amazing the number of people that come in and say, yeah, we love your son, he's done a great job down there. So obviously when we heard about this sad situation over there with the mold, and we were devastated, Dave especially. I mean, he called me one night and said, Dad, I don't know if I can sleep tonight. I don't know what we're gonna do here. And we're not worried about Dave, because Dave's a pretty tough guy and he can make it work. But we are worried about what's going to happen down there. And I just had a couple thought processes. I don't know if you guys heard about what's going on in Muskegon. I'm not real wild about those little kiosks down there. But my wife and I spend our winters where my daughter lives in Tampa, and there's a place called Channelside, if you ever want to look it up. The guy that owns the Tampa Bay Lightning, who has all kinds of money, went in there and bought it, and he's redoing it, and he brought in a bunch of kiosks, and he kind of circled them around in there with some grassy area, and he did a really beautiful job as a temporary fix to decide what's going on. If we could do 5 or 6, if you're going to tear that building down, and I'm all for see whatever can happen there, but if we can find enough to make it look good, C might have to come down too to make it look more like it gives us a little more space there where you could probably put 6 or 7 nice sized kiosks in there. And I'll tell you, they're making kiosks like you've never seen before. Channelside is beautiful. They got a little open area in the middle where people can play bocce ball and some of those, what is that game called, where they throw the sandbags. But anyway, so there's a lot of potential there. I don't think it'd be that expensive. I think that the leases back to the city would probably pay for it until we decide what's going on next. If you're going to rebuild, those kiosks could be resold, or in fact, we'd even be interested in buying one of the design our own. Make them look. I mean, there's so many out there right now. This is what's going on in the communities around beachfront all over the United States, actually. So I mean, I'm just throwing that out as a possibility. That keeps us there, keeps the people. I mean, there's a following down there. I mean, Pete's Frogs, all the people, but Ray's a fixture. We know that. We love him. And so if we can keep Barefoot Dave somewhere down there, we'd really appreciate it. I know I wouldn't want your decision, and I'm sad about the mold. I really am. In fact, I'm starting to feel a little sick inside. The breathing is not as good as it was a couple months ago. So, but anyway, we appreciate it, and good luck to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody's going to say something.
Come on up.
Ben McNeil. I own the Wet Mitten Surf Shop at 301 North Harbor Drive. As long as we're all being friendly, that's why I came here anyways. So I just wanted to say thank you to the city manager and Ashley and you guys for being so transparent through the whole process. My personal situation is a little bit interesting. We actually had our business on the market to sell, so this kind of puts a little damper on that plan. So it makes my decision really easy just to go out of business instead of selling. So that's kind of an interesting side effect when you're leasing a space and not owning the real estate. If the space goes away, the business is effectively worthless. So anyways, that's something that I have to deal with, but it's not the end of the world, and I really appreciate you guys being so transparent and upfront with all this, and life will go on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jerry Salisbury. My wife and I are the owners of Popcorn Paradise. It's been there since 2010. We come to Grand Haven vacationing every year for years, and we would go to the popcorn store, and it was cool. And it came up for sale 5 years ago, and it seemed like a good idea, so here we are. But we love Grand Haven. We enjoy being here. I agree with what everyone said. Everyone's been very transparent, and things just seem like they've been rolling along pretty well, to the point where it seemed like it went from there's a little bit maybe of a mold problem we have to deal with to we got an email that said your business is pretty much worthless because we're going to close you down and throw you out. That's how it felt. Tonight the air is a little different. Doesn't really feel quite that way. I feel better now than on a 3-hour drive when I came over here from the east side of the state. But we would just like to encourage, if there is a solution to remedy it, because as Russ said, his numbers showed on the mold report that you guys had done that everything in store was good, and our mold numbers were lower than his. So that's kind of threw us off, and never really worried much about it because it was like, well, there's mold issues. Maybe there's a little moisture in or dampness in the crawl space. They can dry it out. They can put some stuff in there. They'll get it handled. But it seems that as we walked down there tonight, we looked in suite A4, and you can see that there's no drywall on half the walls, and that it's all vapor locked off, and they're doing something there, but not lately because the sign on the door says September 19th, I think, is what it said when they were doing it. But at any rate, we would love to keep coming to Grand Haven, and not only because we like it, but it's financially. We purchased this business 5 years ago and just about have it paid off, and now it's basically a bunch of used equipment if there's no building to have it in. So hopefully you guys will all consider that when you're making your decisions. And like it's been said, I wouldn't want to have to make the decisions you guys are making. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy. I'm a little emotional. Owner of Popcorn Paradise. This is difficult. This is my passion and my love. And where can you buy popcorn in 50 different flavors? It's a tradition for people to come to Grand Haven to get popcorn on the 4th of July or during Coast Guard event. This is what people and families for years have looked forward to. And now I feel like it's just going to be all swept out. Like, where are we going this year? And not just that aspect, but all my employees. They become my family, and they become part of us. And we're providing employment for the community, and we're adding so much to Grand Haven. I just pray that you'll just consider this wholeheartedly and think about the people as well that are involved in this and the hardships that will happen because of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Now's the time.
Sam Perez, owner of Nautical Nuts. I wasn't planning to speak, but I've been compelled by all these stories. I really wasn't planning on speaking, but I think I have something to share that is meaningful. I came back to Chinook Pier after doing business there as Sam's Tacos, back in 2010. And I did business in Traverse City for the last 3 years. I did one summer, last summer at Nautical Nuts, simply because I truly, truly enjoyed my stay in Grand Haven. I mean, the sentiments that I hear are just compelling, how much people love and appreciate this city, as owners or even local people or what have you. The reason why I decided to speak was, obviously, this is all devastating to everyone, no matter how you see it. Whether the business go or we find a resolution to this. For me, it's going to be devastating because the reason why I came back to Grand Haven to, to bring, you know, do the business here. It was part of my plan to retire. I picked Grand Haven. You know, don't get me wrong, Traverse City is amazing, but Grand Haven, man, every time I was in Traverse City, I thought I was in Grand Haven because I spent so many years here. Again, the only reason why I decided to speak is, you know, I like to if there's anything that could be done to save, you know, Chinook Pier, you know, and I know you guys are finding people that will make the best decisions. And again, I was just compelled to speak because I felt the heartbeats of all these my, you know, the people around me, and truly this is an amazing city. And yes, Chinook Pier is important to the community in the summertime. And again, I just hope that that you guys could you know, listen to the human side of it. You know, obviously it is a monetary investment. It's going to be hard, but at the same time, I am devastated because it's not what I anticipated, you know, coming back to Grand Haven. And thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, if anybody else would like to speak, do it now. Otherwise, we're going to close this comment period and discuss this among ourselves. Okay. We have a motion on the floor, and the resolution is to basically notify our tenants, something which we've been discussing for some period of time, that the building will not be open for business in 2020. And so that's the gist of our resolution. We've got the timeline up here. We've heard it explained, the sequence of events, and we've heard from all of you that Chinook Pier has become a fairly vital piece of our waterfront, a community within itself, and an important piece of this community, both in our waterfront businesses and in our relationship and outreach to each of you and to the citizens. So this is an unfortunate situation which has come up. None of us would have liked to see it come out this way. This is certainly not, it wasn't something that was easy to foresee. But as you see from the timeline, this came out, kind of came to our attention this summer. We've been dealing with it ever since. And so now the choices that we have are we going to, we've been advised by our consultants, by our liability carriers, by our attorneys, by everybody that we've talked to, that the building should not be reoccupied until something is done. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. And that's why you see the resolution before us now, and the timeline on that is relatively unknown, as our ultimate decisions have not been made yet, other than that we have a situation on our hands that we really can't ignore. So, having prefaced my comments with that, I would invite council members to speak who would like to comment.
Well, I'll start. Everybody looks down here, so I might as well start. Let's see what I have to say. This is difficult times. As we see already, the water levels are super high. Our island, we can't even get out to our island anymore because the road's closed because the water's so high. And their crawl spaces in Chinook Pier, it's hard to keep them dry. And it's a very bad situation. I mean, mold is mold, and we're very capable of having people get sick in some areas. In some of these buildings, the count level is extremely high. And for us to not close some of those would be devastating for us to put people in the danger like that. I don't think it's right for us to do something in that order. So, but under Mr. Roberts came and gave us some information today on Building C, which is separate. I'd like to maybe possibly consider something to do with that. Seeing the rest of the people that are all, or should I say, the family of Chinook Pier would be the way to say it, because it is a family down there. And it's just like my family and every other family. Sometimes it's dysfunctional at times, but we all get along very well, and we have our hearts for each other, and you guys tonight stood up for each other very well, so I gotta commend you all for working hard and understanding where council is sitting right now, where we're all sitting at this. But under the vision that Russ brought to us tonight, I wonder if there's a way that if the moisture is coming up from the bottom, if there's really too much there or whatever, if there's ways to remediate some of that, because my brother had the same problem with his house in North Muskegon. He lives right behind the Winter Sports Complex, and he has like a little stream that's always been dry. Well, it's no longer dry. Even the people that have been there 35 years says that it's a stream, but it's not. It's just a runoff for water to go, but it's permanent now. So it makes it very difficult, you know. So he hired a firm to come in, and what they did was they sealed up his basement. He spent a few dollars for it, and it seemed to dry it out for him. And his pump, because his heating is under his house and it's low water there, it doesn't seem to be affecting him at all anymore. His pump doesn't run, the water's not coming in. So there are ways of remediating. I don't know how far the mold is in C, the building C. I don't know any of that circumstances, but it's worth for us to at least take a look at that. The other building, I'm sorry people, but it's just, they're just too far gone. The numbers are all over. I mean, yes, the wet mitten came in low, but it's in a building which is contaminated, and I'm really, really sorry. As I said before, we're in a wet situation all over, so, and it's not gonna go anywhere. It's gonna be here for a while coming. Mr. Davis came and talked today about climate control and stuff like that, and something our whole nation and our whole world has to look at. I don't know if that's part of it or not, but I would say it's mostly going to happen. So that's my comments for now. I'd like to look at, possibly see if it's possible or not.
All right. Denny, thoughts?
So Pat, we were going to hire, or we did hire Evan Marsh to take a look at this too, or not?
Evan Marsh does not have the environmental component. They did refer us to a firm that used to be a part of their firm that does the environmental work, and we did have a chance to talk to that firm. So yes, we have consulted with Evan Marsh. We're going to get their architects to come through just to confirm the cost of remediation. We've looked at some costs. We're getting ongoing information on what the likely costs would be, so we do have architects coming in to verify that a little better. You know, you've seen some of the numbers that we've shown you of what the remediation and renovation costs would be, but there's some interest, I think, in triple checking. We've double checked, and we're going to triple check just to be sure that those estimates are accurate. You know, if you're going to be asked to act on those as soon as January 20th.
Okay. In the meantime, I guess we don't have much of a choice to, you know, if we get a mold problem, we have to take care of it. We have to tell people they can't have their businesses there, and it's a very hard decision, like some of you were saying. It's not an easy decision for any of us to make. Nobody wants to see Chinook Pier closed, and none of us. I know none of us do, and it's a heartbreak, really. It really is for you and for us too. We were just getting our head out of the water with that place, and now we're back in the water again. So. Yeah, but it's a very tough and hard decision to make, and I appreciate your comments, and I understand where you're coming from, and I hope we can help you in some way. But I just don't know what else to do. I mean, we can't have people getting sick in the building, and you know, our people that our consultants that we consulted with tell us we have to. No, we can't have people in their building and customers or employees of yours, and so we don't have much of a choice. And I'm sorry about that. I wish we could figure out something else to do, but there really isn't. So, you know, I mean, we've all struggled with this decision, but it's a tough one. And I know it's a heartbreak for you people, and I feel for you, really do. But at this point, there's nothing much we can do.
Ryan or Mike?
So just want to quickly speak to the one comment. All right, yeah, I know, it's got to extend this out for me. So.
Looking at getting longer cords.
I know.
Louder.
I know. You're big boy. Yeah, a big boy, that's right. So, naturally talk soft. It's okay, that's all right. So, if I'm talking too soft, let me know. But I just want to speak to the one comment related to, I'm the one that made the social media post. And the reason for that is in the interest of transparency. What happens is on the Thursday before every council meeting, there's a packet that goes out to the public, and it's publicly available. So everything that was posted was readily available to the public, and everything on that agenda is also sent to our media partners, our Grand Haven Tribune, WAWL, our WJHN. All of that was out there. My post, I very much stuck to the facts of what was in our packet. Did not put any of my personal opinion on it. That's what tonight is for, because I believe the public has a right to know that this is important for the community as well. It's important for you as business owners and important for you as and our community members to know what type of decision we're making tonight. And so often, I think, I heard this from a lot of people during the recent campaign, we find out after the fact that you made decisions. We don't know what's going on. And I think it's important that folks know ahead of time the types of decisions that we're making. So everything that was out there was publicly available information that I simply just put together to let folks know what's going on, encourage them to follow what's going on or give their comments if they have concerns. So certainly had no intention on anybody being harmed by it. I know there was a period of time where this wasn't readily available to the public, but once last Thursday everything was out there for the public, including this resolution that we're considering tonight. Anybody can go and view the packet right now on our City of Grand Haven website. And I think this is a decision that should be brought to the public light. Made it, we're a public body. We have to make decisions in front of the public and consider their input and your input in making those decisions. Related to the resolution, part that says, whereas the professionals advise that it reads advise that the building, it doesn't read plural, should not be occupied in its current condition. And is that, are they saying one building shouldn't be occupied, or is that just it should say buildings? Is their recommendation that none of the buildings should be occupied in their current condition?
Okay, I apologize for that. On the agenda, it does say the buildings with a S on it, so it was intended to be all three buildings, but that's not to say that the motion that's on the floor right now, I do believe it's on the floor right now, can't be amended.
So our motion, well,
I read it as buildings. That's what he's talking about.
Buildings, yeah.
The motion included buildings.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure our resolution that's in front of us, it's just in the singular as far as that line. I want to make sure that's clarified what we're, but so that is true though, that is what the recommendation of the professionals, that all the buildings shouldn't be occupied at this point.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So I'll make sure we're clear on that. Matt, are you able to speak at all to some of the comments from the Dairy Cream owner related to, kind of his, the folks that he's talked to and what they're telling him and what you're hearing that's different in
a conversation today with a separate, consultant, none of these consultants I don't really think have at least the ones that we've talked to have a horse in the race or anything to gain from making one type of recommendation versus another. This type of presence of mold is not unusual. It's commonly existing in background sampling, and it's not something you would expect to find inside a building at these levels, but sometimes you do have it and you do what you can to clean it up. The recommended approach is first to eliminate the source, eliminate the moisture, find a way to get rid of that first, and then you take care of remediating what's there and ultimately renovate the space. So we've really gone through that with a fine-tooth comb, what all those steps would look like and what the possibilities are, and we've got a pretty darn good idea what that is. As far as how it affects people, it's very frustrating for us because we're trying to apply science that we're familiar with, like our wastewater effluent standards or our drinking water standards, which is a very important thing that we look at day in, day out. And it's very clear, if there's a certain level, so many parts per trillion or something, as long as it's below that level, we're okay. If it's above a certain very well-defined level, you need to take certain actions. With this, it's not that way because all different people react differently to different exposure to different types of mold spores or allergens in the air. So it's very difficult. So there are no FDA or Eagle standards that are out there for us to follow. So all we get are sort of rules of thumb or areas of concern where we might be concerned. They all agree that if you have mold, you should clean it. You should get rid of it if you find it, and you should do what you can to remediate. But there's this total spore count of 1,000 that is sort of used as a rule of thumb. Anything below 1,000 probably isn't a big concern. Anything above 1,000 is something you ought to be more concerned about. If you have something that's just below 1,000 and you're not remediating, chances are it will stay there and it will grow further. You know, it's not going to just go away on its own if the underlying conditions stay the same, which we've been told that water levels are going to stay high, and as much as we pump and dry, you know, it's likely it's going to be really hard to get that area dry, at least in the coming calendar year. So the concern is that we're very near 1,000. Now the building C is below 1,000. You know, there is evidence there, but it's below that area of concern. The other two buildings are well above that overall. Certain suites aren't above that, but the common area, the HVAC areas, the mechanical areas, the venting, you know, the ventilation systems, the underneath, the crawl space are all common, so you could expect that condition might permeate different suites at different times, and we're not testing every day. You know, we don't know what the daily conditions, we've only tested the one time. So I don't know if that answers your question. You know, we continue to get on the phone and get on the internet, and I know our tenants, I'm very grateful for the efforts they've made, for their efforts, each one of them. You know, Russ has spent a lot of time talking to consultants and environmental experts. I think they've all been on probably many of the same internet pages you've been Googling and I've been Googling, reading about this, and it's a very fuzzy science. But the reality is that if there's a threat, if there's a public health threat, these are public buildings, open to the public, we can't risk exposing people to known health risks, no matter how small we might think that risk is. If it is a risk, we have to take it very seriously. So that's why, without exceptions, you're being advised we ought to get the tenants out and either remediate or you know, demolish the buildings. But if you want to look at that, certainly the building of least concern is building C, and it does not have a concrete slab underneath it, I understand. So that may be a different dynamic to get that aired out and get that in good shape. And I will attest to both tenants there, Sam and Russ and Renee. They keep things clean. They're extremely clean businesses. I had a family member who worked there, and she would complain relentlessly about them forcing her to scrub. She's like Cinderella down there. So they do keep their employees very busy, and they also keep the area around there. If you've been down there, there is never a spill that sits out there for more than a few minutes. And it is a meticulously clean area. You feel like you're in a very clean space when you're down there. So if it can be kept clean and made clean, I think these tenants can do that. I mean, from the surface sanitation perspective, they're continually bleaching things and keeping things clean.
So there's a possibility that we could keep building C open then?
If that's what you so direct, we'll take as dramatic steps as we can to keep that space. And we would need to have some considerable, Mr. Roberts delivered a letter, and we'd be interested in following up on that letter. A number of points are brought up in that letter, and we'd need to have some extended discussions about how we insulate the city from risk and somehow manage to keep that building or any of the spaces open. Would be a considerable undertaking.
We could add that all to a resolution of some sort.
So with building C, you're not real sure maybe what's causing it. There's not that crawl space with the water issues and the dampness issues.
Just to clarify, there were, ServPro did report in Fishbeck damp building materials in the crawl space. They had visual findings in the crawl space, not necessarily air quality sampled. Got that clarification, just so that's clear.
For building
C.
C, okay.
The crawl space is the perpetuating issue in that space.
Okay.
Well, those buildings A and B, basically they're built over a bathtub. If you look at the foundation, it's got a crawl space about 3.5 feet deep with a concrete floor. It doesn't drain, doesn't ventilate. It was just built as a closed space, and it's been a breeding ground. This summer there was 8 inches of water, 8 to 10 inches of water standing when it was discovered standing in this crawl space. We pumped that out, pumped it down the sewer, but it comes back as soon as you turn the pumps off.
Right.
Whereas building C would naturally drain when the water level goes down, but the ground's always wet.
Right.
And so there is a difference structurally, but whether or not C is salvageable, you might make your best case there that it could be, but I'm not sure we know that answer. But I think that we have pretty good evidence that buildings A and B are heavily compromised, and only at great cost would we bring them back. And all the areas, as Pat said, crawl space, attic space, mechanical spaces, are common to all those suites, even though individual suites have varying results.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess I'd like to see us maybe do a little more research on building C. Do we have like a cost breakdown of remediation by building, or is it all just one lump sum? Was probably.
We do have a cost breakdown from ServPro of what they think each building would be. The overall renovation, which is the larger portion, is we've just broken out by square foot.
Okay.
You know, assuming, which isn't necessarily true, but assuming that the remediation efforts in each building will be similar as far as the proportion of square footage of, you know, wall that will need to be replaced and flooring and structural members, we're, you know, thinking that they'll all be about the same. So we do have a proportional breakout of looking at each building and what it would cost.
Okay. I'm willing to, yeah, I guess, consider building C a little separately here and look at those numbers and, you know, and whether or not we're gonna be able to, you know, prevent it from reoccurring constantly as well. See what's, I mean, this decision, no doubt, has a significant impact on our local businesses. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, the owner of Nautical Knots talked about the very human side of this. It's very much human, and you've all made that very clear tonight. And the decision also is going to impact our community and our visitors and your customers that look forward to coming here. I was talking to some folks that say, you know, we look forward to going to Chinook Pier when we're walking the boardwalk, or we take our kids to the splash pad, and then we go over and we get some ice cream or something else to eat. But at the same time, we have mold that's potentially harmful to some. And obviously various professionals have looked at these buildings and have concern with them being occupied in their current state. And really, as a city, we have the responsibility to, and as landlords, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the folks visiting and occupying those buildings. And then obviously the time is going to be extensive as we discuss next steps and options and that sort of thing. So at this point, I mean, it seems fairly clear with building A and B. C, I think maybe we do a little bit more research and gather some more information before we make a final decision on that piece, especially if it can be remediated or the concerns addressed in a relatively short period of time, so they could open potentially for the summer. That's what I have at this point.
Yeah.
So, was there any time frame that you know of for remediation on building C? I mean, weeks, months?
When we were looking at the whole project, I believe we heard it would be a minimum of like 6 months to do all the buildings. You know, to just do the one building, it would certainly be months, not weeks.
So something that possibly could be accomplished before.
Could be accomplished before
Should
spring.
we choose that direction?
Yeah.
I would be open to also looking into possibly keeping building C. It seems that one seems to be the lowest in count from the information we've received. I certainly, my heart goes out to people who have businesses in these buildings. A terrible thing to have happen. I really feel, you know, truly bad for you. By the other hand, we can't continue to let it go on because I believe it's only going to get worse. And to that extent, we have to do something to eliminate the issue or remediate the thing. It's a decision that's going to have to be made. Unfortunately, probably not a favorable one. But like I say, I would be in favor of looking at building C and possibly, if possible, to keep that open. Not at the extent of next year we're having this same conversation because the mold has gone back up in building C and it's where all the others are. So I'd like maybe to garner some input on that, if someone has any. I mean, they can clean it up, but I don't know to what extent it will last.
All right, well, I've commented a little bit on this already, and, you know, extremely sympathetic to the tenants. They have been an important part of Grand Haven. And, you know, this is something that...
There's one thought I have here. It doesn't sound like you guys are interested in doing a food thing, and I didn't hear anybody think positively of coming up with something creative down there. But if you do want to talk about it, I definitely would share the channel side thing in Tampa with you, because I think that would be a great asset to the whole area there. If you tear the building down, which it sounds like the obvious thing's going to happen. The other thing, somebody brought up the depot, and there's 3 spaces in there. Are we going to have to present our case on this thing?
That's coming up. That's coming up later this evening.
Are we still on that?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were done.
No, we have,
Oh, okay.
we're still talking. Just be patient with us.
Just hang on, Larry, we'll be all right.
Be patient with us.
So you'd like to...
Ultimately, this is going to come down to how salvageable are these buildings, what's it going to cost, what's the timeline, what are we willing to reinvest in these buildings. And I think that all of us have understood that the 2 big buildings, A and B, have very serious problems, and that the costs are going to be fiscally reckless for us to put that kind of money into them, because you're talking about $1 million+ dollars. And that's kind of the decisions we have in front of us, whether or not we can save building C, and whether if we want to defer a decision on C, we can, but we can't defer it so long that we have held out false hope to the tenants there, and then say, a month or 2 from now, sorry, but we're going to close it anyway. That's why we're having this conversation tonight. So no matter what we do with this resolution, we've got this out here. We've talked about it. And so we've given notice to everyone. We're trying to solve this problem, but the solution may very well be that we scrape that site. If we can save a part of it, we can look at that. If we want to amend our motion to deal specifically with buildings A and B, we can do that. But very soon we need to address building C and what we're going to do. And if we decide to keep it and try to fix it, we have to look at what are we going to invest in the next 2 or 3 months. And I think that's part of the decision. The rest of it, whether we put in pop-up shops or a big tennis court or whatever, whatever we choose to do there, that's the conversation we haven't had yet. That's part of our decision going forward. If we decide the buildings have to go, we haven't made that decision, but it's looking like it. If we make that decision, we have to decide how do we repurpose the site? Do we put more shops in similar to what we've had? Do we put something totally different there? The shops seem to work really well for 30 years. So, it would be a strong case for what has worked will probably work again, and it's engendered a important community or an important facet of our community. So that's certainly a consideration. Tonight's decision is, do we tell people we're closing the buildings? And if we want to say the 2 buildings we know about, well, we'll get back to you on building C, that's fair enough. I think our responsibility in the interest of transparency, thoroughness, fairness to everyone is to make a decision, and the best decision we can with the best information we have, and to be realistic about it so people can move on. I think that's where we're at with this. So.
No.
I can't say that this has anything to do with your equipment. I think that your equipment is your personal property, which you would have to deal with, and because it's in the air, because it's in the wall, what it really is, it's in the walls, it's in the subfloor, it's in the attic, it's in the structure, and getting to it means basically gutting the interiors of the buildings, and then cleaning it up, drying it out, and rebuilding. That's where all the cost comes in. So the stuff you have in there is unlikely to be contaminated to the point of being dangerous or unusable. I don't believe that's the case. I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. But thanks for asking. I think it's a fair question. But that's something that when you get your equipment, you'll have to examine and see what you got. I don't foresee that as being the issue. The issue, I think, is that what's it going to take to dry out, clean up, and repair these buildings. And that's gonna be a big one. So,
Just one more thing. Pat, do you think by next meeting, on all those concerns that Mr. Roberts has on his letter that he sent to us and that, do you think we could have answers on that by maybe next meeting, or would 2 weeks be enough?
You know, what we can do is I've
on
given that
building
some
C.
thought, and I think we could have a resolution presented to you at your next meeting, yes.
Okay.
I don't know that, you know, it's gonna be a negotiation and a discussion. You know, I can't underscore enough the potential exposure for the taxpayers of Grand Haven if there's a bad outcome here.
I understand that.
so-
I understand that it's also, the limit is below, on that building is below the 1,000 mark.
That's right.
So it's willing for us to take a 2-week hiatus from it and take a look and see what are all concerns. So I'd like to make a motion to, the resolution to advise tenants at Chinook Pier that buildings A and B will not be available for occupancy in the spring of 2020, and that they should therefore plan accordingly and take a look at building C and have come back at next, with the Russ Roberts's list that he has there for us to reevaluate at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
could we simplify that to A and B not available for occupancy and building C to be further studied?
If you want to do that, this comes out to the same point of view as what I want, but I want.
I understand what you're saying,
I'm just reading off here and just adding what the last part.
Second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the resolution, basically to exclude C from tonight's action.
Yep, and I second that.
So, any discussion on the proposed amendment?
No, so if we have an answer in 2 weeks, I think that
Okay.
should give you enough time, you think?
Well,
Pat?
we'll need to vote to amend the resolution before we vote on the resolution.
Yes.
So, Linda, could you call the roll to amend the resolution?
Well, since I made it, I better say yes.
Hmm?
To amend, for the amendment, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Well, we had a motion and a second.
okay.
So it was Mike Fritz that made the motion and Mike Dora seconded?
No, it
Is
was
that-
Ryan.
Ryan did.
Oh, it was Ryan
Ryan
seconded,
seconded.
okay.
Sorry, I didn't read that back to
That's
you.
okay.
Read it back to us so everybody knows.
Voices yet.
Can't hear mine.
Okay, so this is to amend the motion that was made before, and you want me to read what it's going to say now? To advise tenants at Chinook Pier that buildings A and B will not be available for occupancy in the spring of 2020, and they should therefore plan accordingly pending a final decision by city council. Did you?
With further study of building C,
with
just
further
tacked on to
study
the
of
end of
building
it.
Right, that has to be,
Okay.
that's what we're voting on our motion that we amended. Make sure you get it right. You can have it, say it back to us one more time if you'd like, so everybody understands.
Okay, you know what, give me a minute. I want to do some cutting and pasting here to make sure I get it exactly right.
To give her some relief, I'll fill
Thank
the
you.
dead air space because there are people listening on WAWL. I just want to throw out there for your consideration some things that have come up during this discussion and otherwise to hopefully cast a slightly brighter light on this. What I've heard tonight has been very valuable to hear from all these tenants of the continued permanent interest in that space. It is a neighborhood down there. They're
Yes.
committed for a long term, not just this year. They're not worried about what happens with this. They want to be there for good. So what can we do as a city to offer help to get them over this period? If there's going to be an interim period, if there's going to be a break, a job of some sort, and then reestablishment of a retail presence down there. So of course, we're going to talk about the depot in a few minutes here. The idea of pop-ups came up, and you know I'm a big fan of pop-ups, and I'd love to evaluate that. And Larry had stated that he'd be willing to talk to us about helping with that, so maybe we come up with a concept that works there. Other commercial spaces throughout the downtown, whether we control it or not, there is, Jeremy Swiftney with the DDA has been very helpful with Ashley and Jennifer identifying various properties that are open and available and making connections, and we'll keep beating that bush to find them space. And perhaps most profoundly, if City Council's willing to leverage your ownership, you own the real estate, whatever we're going to do down there, that's very valuable real estate. And we may be able to leverage that ownership with some future development to guarantee a spot there, first row for the current tenants. So if we do go about some new revised investment, we leverage our value in the ownership to create a continued tenancy that respects what their current leases are, because you can imagine a brand-new building would likely drive per foot rates up. But maybe we can leverage that to keep it affordable for them, to not, throw them in the fire. I think that would be a considerable, looking at some of those things, and we'll talk about the depot tonight, but some of those other things may be on the January 20th agenda too, that, let's give them a lifeline, something to hold on to, so that they know that council's as committed as they are. Because I think you have a loyal bunch of tenants. They've been there, most of them have been there a very long time, and they continue to come back and they keep reinvesting in their businesses. Every year I go down there and you see new stuff, and there's a new gigantic backgammon game or something sitting out there. I don't know where these things come from. I think I can guess, but there are a great group of tenants, and that's hard to find. Most towns, they have like a strip mall feel where there's one owner and there's set hours and everything. Down there, you're never quite sure what you're gonna get. So I hope we can come back on January 20th, not only with a rather cold analysis of the dollars and cents and the environmental condition, but also some ideas where you can reach out and make a difference to give them something to hope for, so they know you're not gonna leave them, stranded out there.
Okay, thanks. Linda, are you ready?
Give you enough
Ready.
time?
Yes.
Okay.
Read it to us then. Read what we're voting on.
To advise tenants at Chinook Pier that buildings A and B will not be available for occupancy in the spring of 2020, and they should therefore plan accordingly, pending a final decision by City Council with further study of Building C. Is that what you
Sounds
wanted?
good.
Okay.
Sound good, Ryan?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, would you please
That's
call the
what we're
roll?
voting on.
Okay, so you're voting on to amend the motion
We're
first.
voting on the amendment to the resolution.
Yep.
And then we'll vote on the resolution.
Correct. Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, are we ready to vote on the resolution now? Do we need to go around again? Okay,
I think we went through this already.
I think we have. Linda, could you call?
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right. Well, as follow-up to that, now we're trying to accommodate who we can with what we have. And so our next item of business next couple of items of business deal with potentially using the Grand Trunk Depot for some accommodation for some tenants. So, next item, please.
Next item is to direct staff to negotiate acceptable lease provisions for rental space at the Grand Trunk Depot to provide space for displaced tenant Temptations from Chinook Pier. The administration recommends approval.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, motion by Scott, second by Cummins. Jack, would you like to give us comments on this?
Well, I would. We had a meeting with the tenants on December 19th, which was when we had just gotten our feedback from the second contractor on what the restoration costs were going to be. So we wanted to have as much information as we could. There's a little frustration at that meeting that, this is kind of an ambivalent bunch of information you're giving us, but as well, we're doing the best we can, and we're wanting to give you the information we have rather than wait until February when we've got a better feeling and drop the bomb on you then. I mean, it's a very bitter bit of news, and we got it out as soon as we could. Back in the end of 2017, the city went out for proposals asking interested people to submit proposals to occupy the south end of that depot building. We received 4 proposals, and I can go over what they were, but one of them was Temptations. That proposed to go into that building. It's still an active expression of interest. We still haven't nailed down who's going into that. As you know, there's been considerable other discussion about temporary tenants and renovation of the building and how that's going to happen and what it's going to look like. So right after that tenant meeting on December 19th, I think 2 days later, we had a proposal from Temptations saying we'd like to affirm our interest and we would really like to go in there now during this current period with whatever's going to happen to Chinook Pier. And because they were one of the original bunch that had proposed, and the other proponents have been set aside at this point. They're the last viable proponent from that initial request just over 2 years ago. It was almost exactly 2 years ago that we actually opened those expressions of interest in that space, and we did get one from Temptations. So that's why that's on the agenda as a separate one tonight. It's made by Temptations. They were one of the originals, and they were the first one to come forward currently and say, we'd really like to occupy that space. Now, whether that ends up being a temporary or a longer-term tenancy remains to be seen. You know, this resolution is just to get your permission to go ahead and begin negotiations. There's an awful lot to talk over. There's a considerable amount of investment that has to happen, and we have to talk to the tenant about how that's going to be covered. But that's wasted time if you're not willing to do it. You know, I don't want to spend the time working on that if it's not something City Council supports.
All right, thank you. Mike?
I would support that, providing that the information that you're talking about is made available to us so that we can look at that and review it to make sure that there's, you know, nothing we don't want to see happen to the depot that's going to be incurred because of that.
Okay.
Also along with the fact that it is a very, very old building that has some issues of its own. So I would support that right now, just to gather more information.
On those lease agreements, Mike, seeing you're new here, they do come to us anyways. We have to approve the lease and we'll see everything that goes along with it beforehand.
Yep.
It's nice to ask them for it, though. I appreciate you telling that. You're actually correct. It is an older building, and right now we're just in the process of just having Pat going with that direction. So, but all leases and anything like that, anything that we agree to comes through us. He doesn't okay it to him. So you'll get all the information you'll need.
I just wanted to affirm that.
You will, just to let you know.
Unless you want to vote tonight to just let me figure it out.
No, okay. No. Yes, it is. It will take 4 of us to say yes to it.
Yes, I think we've run into that before.
Yes, if you did.
At least a couple of times.
Yes, more than once. So,
Okay.
very good.
Any thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, I think in general, you know, looking at the depot as an option, at least on a short-term basis for the displaced tenants makes, you know, as long as it makes good financial and community sense, is good. I'm curious to see, you know, what some of the costs are going to be for, you know, the proposal kind of lays out that, you know, basically the city would provide the general electrical and plumbing upgrades that the building needs anyways, but if there was something beyond that that maybe was specific to your business, maybe you needed extra sinks or something like that, or lines for that your business would cover that. I'm kind of curious to see what those numbers will be, you know, where that funding is going to come from. One thing in your proposal that I did have some concern with, I'm not sure I'm in favor of the temporary removal of a couple of the windows on Harbor. You know, I certainly understand that your business is a walk-up business, for, you know, it's ice cream, but I'm not sure that walk-up service is quite the look and feel that we're looking for that building, whether it's short-term or long-term. And I have concern with, you know, there being damage done to the windows and maintaining the look and integrity of the building. So I do have some pause related to that portion of your proposal. But other than that, I'm willing to certainly support Pat sitting down and negotiating with you and seeing what we can work out to come to a good resolution for you and for us to occupy the space and generate some revenue for the depot and then kind of test out and see how it goes there. So.
I'm okay with it. And I know you probably want to walk out window there, and I guess I'm really okay with taking the glass out, but you know, as long as you don't mess with the frame or whatever, you know. So, and so, anyways, I think I'm okay with that. So the glass can be put back in anytime, so that's not a big deal. So as long as the frame stays there, I don't. But again, that's negotiations. We're not negotiating right now, so I just want to say, yeah, I'm in favor of supporting you going in there. So yeah.
Our time will come.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm in favor. So
Yep.
that's all good.
And I would echo the concerns about alterations to the depot. The depot is a very historic building. We've had quite a bit of debate about how much alteration we can tolerate at the depot and how much we want to compromise it. And you've heard this before because you made a previous proposal. So this is not news. It's just being reiterated that the terms of the lease would have to be negotiated so that we minimize the impact on the depot. And I think we also ought to go into this with the understanding this is likely to be a temporary tenancy, could extend longer, but because we're still hammering out what the ultimate use of the depot would be, we've kind of set that process aside. Earlier, we authorized spending money on Progressive A&E to come and help us figure that out. But because of the crisis we have with Chinook Pier, it's one of the few pieces of real estate that the city can do something for some tenants, and so we're trying to make that available. Long-term changes to the depot, I think I'd approach pretty cautiously. If it's a matter of taking out a window and potentially putting it back in, that's very likely possible. If it's something completely stripping out interiors and changing things all around, we'd have to look at what that means. And if it means the city's got to run all kinds of utilities that we're not going to need in the future, we probably don't want to pay for that. So those are all negotiation pieces. I don't think we're negotiating today. We're just telling you general expectations.
Thanks for showing me your hand.
Okay. Yep. Anyway, that's kind of what my feeling is. As far as, is it fair for Temptations to be put first in line for space at the depot? I think the history of previous interest is pretty compelling to me, and shows a sensitivity to using the depot because of what you proposed in the past. So I'm okay with that piece of it, and I think that here again, we're trying to make do. We're trying to give as many people as soft a land as we can. So I'm okay with this, and the negotiations will tell the rest of the tale. So any other thoughts, or shall we vote?
Good?
Okay. You call the roll?
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right. Next item.
Next item is to accept proposals from displaced Chinook Pier tenants to occupy portions of the Grand Trunk Train Depot located at 1 North Harbor for a period from March 1st, 2020 through September 20th, 2021. The administration recommends approval.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Fritz, second by Dora. Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify, is there a reason we did September 20th, or was that meant to be September 30th?
Did I write it wrong? It's possible.
Well, no, you didn't read it wrong. That's what it says on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why it might have just been a typo. I don't know if we want to make that September 30th. Is that a good 10 days for a retailer? So maybe October 10th, just to be safe with that.
There you go.
Why don't you negotiate that?
Why don't you negotiate?
Yeah, why don't you negotiate that for us?
Okay, I will, but if we could put October 10th in the resolution tonight, then that just,
I'm okay with that.
Got it.
based on strong community feedback.
Well, as I recall, this started out as one summer, and we made it 2 summers. So,
Yeah, that was the idea.
yeah, we've been flexible. Okay. We have motion second.
Yeah, I'm all set.
Good.
That's on the current item, not last item,
Correct. This is on the,
but which still says September 20.
Yeah, that's not gonna change up there.
yeah, motion is on October 10th. Okay, yeah.
October 10th.
Okay.
Very good.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes.
I thought he meant the previous.
Was that just the change?
That's change.
Where are we at now, Linda?
This is to set the date of January 20th to hold a public hearing to gather citizen input on 2 proposed amendments to the Code of Ordinances regarding the establishment of 5 new land uses related to medical marijuana establishments, the establishment of allowable zoning districts for each use, and the establishment of special use regulations for each use, and Section 9.5 business regulations to establish a new Article 4 titled Commercial Medical Marijuana Facilities.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I think Scott beat you to it.
That's okay.
Motion by Cummins, second by Scott. This is strictly to set,
Answer that question about proposal or not?
No, not yet.
Is that still coming? Oh, gee, I thought you-
have a seat.
Have a seat, Larry.
I think we're moving along here. Right now, we're trying to set a public hearing. Okay, so this is a motion to set a public hearing based on all the conversation we had earlier tonight. Any questions?
No.
Questions? I think we're ready to vote.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, so it's not really on our agenda, but let's talk briefly about
Larry.
about what?
Larry's.
Larry's idea for pop-up. Why don't you come up here? So, I mean, basically what I said earlier,
Up here or here?
no, right there. Basically what I said a few minutes ago was that we've not made decisions about what we're going to do with that site yet. We're not ready to make those decisions.
I got you.
And so that was kind of where, when I said we'll get to that, that's what I meant was.
I got you. No problem.
We're not really ready for that, but we will want to know that.
Sure.
We're going to be working on it.
Here's the problem with that. We're looking at, go ahead, Dave.
Please come up here and identify
Up to the
yourself.
microphone.
You
identify
gotta remember,
yourself.
you're on YouTube and you're on the radio.
Yeah, well, I think what we're curious of is there was supposed to be two more other tenants for the possible into the depot, and then we skipped over it seemed like, so that's what I was
Yeah,
trying to
we
figure
didn't talk about that one much.
Okay.
So,
Then, are you Ashley? Yes. Yeah, Ashley brought that up. I asked a question on the internet, that's all. All we're interested in is knowing if they are gonna do that. And our problem is, we're looking at spaces too, because Dave's gotta have a space next year. He's got quite a following, so he could probably go anywhere, but we'd rather be in the depot with Ray and the gang. But, we certainly would, we gotta do something, and we can't lose a space. I mean, we're talking to people tomorrow about a space, and they're gonna say, hey, you gotta make a commitment here, one way or the other. So I hate to put you in an expeditious position, but that's what we're in, really. I think everybody is. So, anyway.
okay, the motion we just passed was to do the RFP for
Okay.
the remaining tenants to express interest in those few spots that are available
Sure.
at the depot. And so you should be hearing from Ashley
Or Pat,
Pat.
okay, great.
okay?
Thanks, guys.
Sorry for the confusion.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. All right, next item.
Next item is under unfinished business, and this is to approve a final resolution amending the City of Grand Haven Code of Ordinances by restating Section 7-5A4 regarding prohibitions on harboring and keeping of animals per Chapter 7, Article 1. What did I just? Okay, pertaining to barking dogs to simplify approach to enforcement. This motion carried, the administration recommends approval. Got an extra line here.
All right, this is second reading. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, motion by Cummins, second by Dora, for second reading on the amendment to this barking dog enforcement.
Question.
Yes.
I've been asked again, I'll ask it one more time. A good example is, people have dogs, yes, they do bark, but they do protect inside their homes. Is this gonna be a barking dog if they're barking in their houses? Is it gonna pertain to that because they are protecting their property? Or is this an ordinance for them just to protect the dogs that are barking outside? Because sometimes people aggravate dogs and they bark and the neighbor calls, on a dog that's barking in a house. So I have my reservations on barking dogs inside homes, because some dogs that they protect, that's what they're for. People have them to protect their property. So we have to make sure that we're not stepping on the boundaries of them doing their job of protecting their home from the inside. I don't mind the outside, when you're barking outside and they're obnoxious and they got a fenced-in yard and it runs up and whatever, I understand that. But when they're locked in a house and doing their job, I don't think we need to be regulating that.
I think the situations I'm aware of, it's been outdoor barking dogs.
I know, but on this ordinance, we have to make sure that
Well,
it's clear, because if they start barking inside and they end up getting a call, you have a barking dog, our ordinance states is that barking dogs.
Well, it says it's, the only thing we're changing, because you could do that today if you got two neighbors to say, we don't like this dog barking inside its house.
I just want to make sure that they're covered, because
So the only thing we've really done is make it possible for the responding officer to be that second complainant. Now, if you wanted to specifically say dogs barking outside, I'm not sure we need to, but I think that,
well, it says on harboring and keeping of animals, you know, I mean, prohibition of it for barking, pertaining to barking dogs.
says,
You know, that's what it says.
continued loud barking, howling, whining, yelping, become a nuisance by causing a noise disturbance or discomfort. And so, like I said, the only thing we're changing here is requiring two separate homeowners in two separate homes. Instead, we're saying that second person can be that officer if he hears it. If he doesn't hear it, then there's no complaint. I mean, it's not that much different.
I have a neighbor that dogs bark, but they're in the house.
Okay.
And I have a neighbor that doesn't like the dogs, so they're gonna call, and he goes over, the officer sees the dog, hears the dog barking.
And then he has to decide whether or not he thinks it's a nuisance.
Oh, he decides.
Just because,
But he's going by ordinance. Remember, they follow ordinance. Am I not correct?
they're following the ordinance now and they can do nothing.
Okay. I'm just worried about my neighbors and people that have dogs inside.
Yeah, and the point here isn't to make it hard to have dogs. The point is to take care of neighbors who can't get any other relief. Because it works both ways.
Yeah, I don't know how many complaints we've ever gotten about a dog barking inside a house. I think it's probably outside, and I think if we had an officer that went and wrote a ticket for a dog barking inside a house, we've probably not got an ordinance problem, we've got more of a personnel problem.
Okay.
'Cause I don't think they'd write a ticket for a dog barking inside a house. That wouldn't seem reasonable at all to me. So I don't think that's a problem, like Bob said, that's the way the current ordinance is written, but we could put language in there that says for dogs, audible outside. 'Cause what if, I mean, I don't want to belabor the point too much, but if the window's open and the dog's at the screen barking, it could very well really annoy the neighbor. But if the window's closed, well, it's muffled, yeah, there's a dog barking, but it's really not a violation if it's not creating a nuisance, you know, it's.
Well, you could have multifamily housing where there's dogs barking inside and driving neighbors nuts too.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be in an apartment where the dog's going all the time next door and, hey, you gotta figure out a way to quiet that dog down. Then that might be a landlord-tenant type issue too.
Yeah,
More than likely.
There could be a lot of other problems besides the dog. Could be something going on in that house or with that dog for that matter. I mean, we wouldn't know.
Yeah, could be a problem in there.
But if we can't even respond.
As the words come from your mouth saying that if we have an officer goes up there for a dog in a house, we have an officer problem. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
A personnel problem?
Yes.
Okay.
I would want to get it more into that detail. Maybe it's been going on for 3 days straight and there's a good reason for it, but.
Oh, yeah. Probably because the guy is no longer alive.
Yeah,
Dog's
could
barking.
be.
I wonder why, maybe.
Might be a good reason for the officer to respond.
Yeah, there you go.
Be a good thing then.
That's why he's been going for 3 days.
Yeah.
That's just a point that was brought up to me by constituents that wanted to know, so.
Okay, understand.
That's my point. They got German Shepherds and they bark. I've had a Saint Bernard. He never barked, the second one did. They have deep voices.
They do. Anything else? Anyone?
No.
We ready to vote?
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Seeing that Pat pointed it out to me, yes.
Manetza?
Yes. Thank you. Okay. We are to report by city council. Who has a report?
Happy New Year. I mean, the ball drop was fantastic. I mean, I was down there. I want to thank Mr. McGinnis and Ashley and everybody, whoever else all worked on this. I tell you what, especially Pat, I mean, you got the sound system going and you definitely got the crowd revved up. I mean, you were right there, so congratulations. It was good
Close
dance.
one this year.
It was a good dance music, you know. The crowd didn't start coming until almost like 1:45, and all of a sudden by midnight it was packed. it was great to see everybody out there. It was really, really good. So I want to say kudos to another great New Year's Eve. I see where Ludington has like a little area opened up for having a cold beer outside. You know, it might be something for us to look at, see what they have and what to expand on it instead of doing the same thing. You might want to take a good look. They started out with like, what, 3,000 or 4,000 people when they first started out, and they're up to like, what, 15,000 now people coming there. It's just unbelievable what it attracts. The people are staying in the hotels and spending nights there. I've had one of my salesmen lives in Grand Rapids, comes down to me, he says, yeah, I go to Ludington area because I get myself a hotel and I stay there and they have a good time. So might be something for us to look to expand on, also make it just a little bit more, you know, spice it up. It'd be nice to attract a whole lot more.
More spicy than that was?
Well, that was pretty good. Pat had some good music going, so, but the fireworks were fantastic. I mean, that's a good show for us compared to everybody else. Grand Rapids finally started their ball drop, and they had 2 named bands come and play, so and maybe something just to add to it one more time. If we can do that, it would be really nice just to think about. Other than that, I'm glad to see we're all made it through the new year and we're all going, so tough decisions this first night. I want to say, yeah, Mike, and congratulations for making it tonight. I mean, you've had a rough goal for the last couple of weeks, so glad to see you here.
Thank you.
You know, surgery's not fun. So, but anyways, I want to say I'm really sorry to the tenants down there and what happened, and it's beyond our control. Being a small business owner myself, and I don't want to have them come in and do an air quality control in my body shop. I mean, there's nothing in my shop that anybody would like to inhale for long periods of time, no matter what. And you can have all the regulations, and I follow everything from they want me to do for clean air and that, but I tell you, it's still there. But I haven't died yet. I'm here. But anyways, other than that, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Nothing.
No, I was not able to attend the ball drop, although I would have really loved to. Considering what I was going through at the time, it would have been much more fun. I did hear from some folks, though, that it was a really great event and everybody was having a good time, so good job, Pat. I'm very pleased to be here tonight and look forward to many more meetings. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot to add.
Well, Happy New Year from me as well. I was very glad to see Mike is on the mend. Very scary there for a bit, but glad to see you here tonight and making progress and doing well. You know, despite the difficult decision tonight, it has a significant impact. I was very impressed to hear folks' sentiment towards our city staff and how they've handled things, and getting them information and timelines and discussing options. And so there was a lot of comments about that, you and Ashley and your work on that. So kudos to you guys and your work on this and continued work that's coming. I mean, I know there's a lot still to work through that we got to make some decisions on. And then big thank you to our staff and our video team here tonight for putting us on Facebook Live as well. So we've been on YouTube Live for sounds like quite a while, and now on the radio, but now we're also available on Facebook Live. So another opportunity for folks to keep an eye on what's going on and be transparent and be involved in our decision-making process. So a big thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, I also attended the ball drop. It was fun, and appreciated Pat's efforts. Kind of it's the Pat show. We appreciate his efforts and the music and all the work you do to set it up and all the work that public safety and public works do in order to put this on. And it's a pretty nice little event. Very, very, very brief, but it's a nice little event.
That's
And I appreciate the fireworks too. That looked good. I appreciated being able to participate in Bonnie Suchecki's retirement. I believe that's happened since our last meeting. She gave us many years of absolutely fabulous service as our HR director. She will be missed. We have a new young man on staff now, picking up those duties, and so it's Zach, what's Zach's last name?
Van Osdol.
Van Osdol.
Osdol,
I'll learn it,
AOS.
and he'll learn mine.
Van Osdol.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're expecting great things from Zach and a great many years of it. I did want to make one brief comment. I attended the Board of Light and Power meeting. At their last meeting, they had a lot of their routine business, but they also talked about a notice of intent. They awarded a contract to demolish the Sims plant, and they are looking at the cost for the remediation and all the process going step by step from this point forward to take down Sims and replace the use with something else on Harbor Island. And so they had on their agenda, they had a notice of intent to cover a variety of costs for selling bonds, basically. It's the first step in going forward with financing all the things they have to do, including the demolition, the remediation, any reconstruction, new facilities, anything else that they're going to do. And so they had a disagreement about the wording of that because it specifically called for a new peaking generating plant. And there was some question about whether that ought to be split into possibly two different notices or whether they would actually going to pursue that. What the notice of intent actually would do is reserve their ability to sell bonds and recover the costs that they're currently using working capital for in terms of the demolition and all the engineering studies. So that will eventually move forward and come to us, whether it comes to us as a single notice of intent or a pair of them. Not sure at this point. That's a BOP issue to decide. But they had a little bit of disagreement on their own board, and they had a 2-2 vote on that, so it didn't move forward. So I anticipate that that will. There was a lot of discussion about that and what the motion meant and what they were trying to accomplish. So they will sort that out, and people who are interested need to follow the Board of Light and Power's meetings in some detail. So, and we are very transparent with our meetings here. We post everything online, even the stuff that Ryan basically reposted to Facebook was already posted online and available to the public. And we're looking forward to the BOP being consistent with that just as we are. And we can all understand what's going on. So that's pretty much my report. Time for a city manager's report.
Thank you, Your Honor. I was planning on a very extensive presentation on PFAS tonight, but I think I'll...
The first hour will be PFAS, and then what?
Yeah. Well, first hour will be on the wastewater plant, the second hour on the water plant. But in your packet is a press release Joe Vanderstel produced and sent out. Very informative and worthwhile. When there's a PFAS settlement or release or discovery, the media's all over it, everybody gets all excited about it. In between these big news events, we're doing our jobs and we're keeping up on this stuff very well. The water plant, of course, keeping very careful track of what's in our water, and if any of that stuff's getting through to us, it's not. It's not in our water. It's not getting through to us. Joe did a nice job of explaining what the current status is. And then also attached is a letter from Eagle to our wastewater plant explaining where the state's at with the whole PFAS task force and everything. And, we're looking at where's it coming from, and so let's get rid of that. But at the same time, we're checking, are we getting it in our drinking water? And Grand Haven is all over it. You've got extremely professional scientists who were not easy to find working at your wastewater plant and your water plant, watching this every single day. So when I looked into it last week, I'm reading this stuff, I got to tell City Council about this. This is good stuff, and it's constant. I know I've reported on it before, and you'll hear about it again, and you should. And I think the public needs to hear about it constantly. And I just wish it were a little more higher profile when things are going well and we are paying attention. When it hits the news, that everybody has a bit of an extreme reaction. And why is this getting in our water? It's like, well, we are watching it carefully. So it's on the website. Please read it. I won't speak much more about that. Did want to thank Ryan for his idea about getting on Facebook. Scott did a lot of work. He was in here for a lot of hours going through that. It was a little bit of a technical issue, but Scott, along with Matt and the schools, overcame it, and we're on Facebook Live tonight along with the YouTube channel. And I think we've got far more people paying attention on Facebook than YouTube, so hopefully this elevates that. Another item since your last couple meetings is we've got an email subscription service. So if you want to subscribe to the agenda, you simply click online, put your email address in there, and every time we post the agenda, you get an email with a link. And you can just click on it and you've got the agendas right in front of you. So the entire packet, everything that an elected official sees before the meeting, you can have at the same time the elected officials are getting it and know exactly what's being discussed. All the information you have is available right at your fingertips. So it just goes to show you, a year ago I would have thought we were doing everything we could. You get a couple new ideas and, bingo, we're doing more. So any other ideas, please let us know. Eric Kalin is working on some cable access initiatives that I hope we can be very supportive of, that will even further accelerate our transparency. Finally, the next Monday, the 13th of January, I'm inviting all of City Council to come to the Rotary meeting at the Community Center at noon. We're going to recognize Rotary for doing the flag project all year in 2019, and it's a little bit, it's going to be at noon on the 13th, a week from today. We're exploiting the Rotary a little bit because a little bit of it is to keep them going and get them to do it in 2020. So we kind of get them fired up and say, God bless America and thank you very much, and the Honor Guard will post the colors, and then we'll recognize all of them, and then we'll say, oh, by the way, next year we've got these, this next year it looks like we're going to do 7 dates. We've traditionally done 6. We're going to add Patriots Day, September 11th next year, put all those flags out. But public safety and Public Works are both very active in that as well. The Public Works Department helps us get everything ready. Public Safety gives us an escort each time. And a bunch of Rotarians, even though they've got a few laps around the sun on them, they're still doing a lot of laps with those flags every time there's a patriotic holiday. Twice a day, 7 a.m., 7 p.m., they go up, they come down. We do that out of respect for our veterans. They're only up for that day. We don't want to leave them up for a long period of time. We just get them up, take them down. And if you can make it on Monday, the 13th at noon, you're all welcome to join me at the Rotary meeting. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Yep. Thank you. All right. At this point, we have our second call to the audience, second opportunity to address council. Same ground rules as before. If you'd like to address council, please come forward to the podium, identify yourself, and speak.
Russell Roberts, Dairy Cream. I guess I would like to, we only had 3 minutes before, so I didn't get to say a few things that I'd like to say, staying within that time limit. As I've sent all of you an email, including Pat, I appreciate everything you guys do. Grand Haven's a great city, and you've made it a great place. It's a great place to do business. We love being here and stuff, and I thank you for everything you've done. I also said to Mayor and Pat today, I don't envy, and Mike, I don't envy the position you guys were in with what you were doing tonight, and I'm sure you didn't want to trade positions with me either. So, that being said, I appreciate that. I know I came across as negative, but I am appreciative. I understand you're doing your job, and I'm trying to protect my interests. That being said, there is I didn't get to address the depot. There is obviously an option there. I looked at that when you were talking about that. I've talked to a couple different people. My business is very electrical and water intensive. My machines cool on water. They run a lot of ice cream through them, and you have to, air can't cool them. There would be, for me to go in there with a mop sink, 3-compartment sink, all the three-phase electric that I have to run to 3 different machines and all that. I've talked to a couple of different people, and they figure the build out for something like that would be $50,000 to $100,000. For a 2-year period of time, that would not be a prudent business decision on my part. Then something else gets built at Chinook Pier. I come back to that, and I got another $50,000 to $100,000 build out. All in a period of 2 years. Now, if there was ever anything, and we don't know where this is going to go, even though we still don't know where it's going to. I'm still up in the air where this is going with Building C even. That being said, if it was more of a permanent solution there and a permanent type thing, as you said, I did hear something to that fact that it possibly could be even for Temptations. You know what I mean? That would be something that if that was the case, that you had years, then those costs may be manageable. You know what I mean? But otherwise, you know, in a short period, those aren't manageable. So, and I don't know where I'm gonna be, even, maybe I hope we have this information by next week, and we can have some kind of a decision as to what that is, or what that means, or what it looks like, you know. I guess I wanna say again, you saw the bridge in Ferrisburg. An engineer said, boom, you can't go in there, you can't do this, it's shut for a year and a half, okay? You guys are having, and none of us are specialists on this, I understand that with regard to mold. You guys are having someone that's saying this, I'm having someone else that says, hey, that's not that. I don't see any other issues that are in the building other than it is damp in the crawl space that needs to be addressed. You know, I mean, air moving through there would take, you know, ServPro does something like that. They said it's almost like a dryer or a vent for your bathroom, you know, and whatever like that, you know. I mean, those are the types of things that could be looked at, you know, and stuff. So anyways, thank you again. I appreciate your consideration this evening, and we'll be talking further, I guess, so thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I want to comment too that I'm really impressed by how all the Chinook Pier tenants have cared about each other and appreciated what staff has tried to do for them with transparency and outreach. And I think it's been as good as it can be for the situation we've got, and appreciate all that. So thank you. Anyone else? Otherwise, we will adjourn. So, we are adjourned.